right. All right. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be evaluating a debate between three Christians and three Muslims on a topic that isn't really relevant to those who aren't Christian or Muslim, but it's interesting. I mean, you can make it relevant. You can probably find reasons to see why it's an interesting discussion, but it's like insider baseball against two teams that have been at it about Jesus for, well, since Islam has began. But you can go further back. Christians themselves could not, figure out whether or not the Trinity was the case in the New Testament, various understandings of that theological position over time, and it gets nailed out. So the question is ultimately, did Jesus teach the Trinity? That is what they're going to be debating. And this is the YouTube video. Looks like it's three different channels. The Way with Brian Davila. The Way with Brian Davila, God, Logic, Apologetics, Inspiring Philosophy. And it looks like the Muslim side, there are three on the Muslim side, they must have their own version of this that they have their own audience attached to, I guess. Not really sure. We're going to listen to what they say. We're going to comment as we go and, make our own personal remarks. I'll say up front, let me come back to me for a second here. I'll say up front, I do think the New Testament is trying to portray Jesus in a divine manner. Okay. I have no, if the New Testament was teaching the Trinity, and what do we mean by the Trinity? Like the nailed down later God from God, co-equal, eternally, like all of these aspects. If the New Testament taught that as like a uniform doctrine, whatever. If it taught that about, Apollonius of Tyana, whatever. Heracles, whatever. Caesar, and there was a Trinity, it doesn't bother me one bit. So it's not like I care in the sense that I need to defend a position. I have actually a video. Golly, I should have pulled this up before we came up. This is worth playing before we begin because, I'm harsh on Christianity. I at least to be very critical because I came out of it. A lot of people know, they're like, man, you do a lot of that. I also have done a whole series, 30-something videos over the years, critical scholarship on Islam as well. Like, I want to understand this later Abrahamic faith. They claim goes all the way back since Adam and Eve, but it's a much later concoction. And on Twitter, I came across a Muslim who I think is somewhat popular. You can better help me out with this. Here we go. Sharing my screen with that. And here's what he says. Notice what he says before we even begin. Anybody watching this, I don't know who this Sajid, I think it's Sajid Lifam, if I'm saying that right. I'm probably butchered his name. Okay, here's what he says. Cropping it out a little bit more so you can see the whole video. Let me know if you can hear this in the chat, everybody.
Did the historical Jesus teach the Trinity? So as Muslims, we would be looking at the historical accounts of Jesus, which arguably could be the Synoptics and John. And from that, we would say that nowhere in the Synoptics and John is there anything where Jesus is teaching any kind of triune doctrine that you guys believe in.
Respectfully, I would just like to say that as Muslims, if we want to understand the historical Jesus, we need look no further than the Quran and the authentic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Gospels they're referring to are not authentic.
So just to be clear,
so notice immediately starting off, this Muslim on the top is saying we look no further than the Prophet. And, I imagine the traditional material, the Hadith, the Quran, which is the Prophet, but, the Hadith as well, for Jesus. Like 700 years later. And here's the thing, like, while you're going to hear me be critical, of course, I think of the Christian Nicene Creed, Trinitarian kind of, it's not even fully nailed down then even. You still get a development of it as time goes by in the Christian history. But, like, of course, I'm not going to buy that that's what the New Testament is selling. I think the components, the ingredients are there, and later Christians find ways to nail it out. And of course, because I don't think the New Testament is teaching one view, you're going to find a way to make your systematic theology work. Christians have done that quite well for 2,000 years. But the fact that this Muslim on the top is already like rebuking, so to speak, these guys at the bottom that we're going to be reviewing, notice what he says.
Respectfully, I would just like to say that As Muslims, if we want to understand the historical Jesus, we need look no further than the Quran and the authentic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Gospels they're referring to are not authentic.
So like, if we have to refer to the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad or his teachings, which I imagine is hadith, but maybe there's sunnah, something. Like, if you have to work on 700-year later material to get to the historical Jesus, and you can't get, I bet you I could have God Logic and Michael Jones agree with me that if the Gospels are not something you can actually ascertain anything historical about Jesus out of, the odds that you're going to get something that is more accurate historically 700 years later in the Quran material is absurd. Now, he wouldn't agree with me. They wouldn't agree with me on this, but like, if you can't gain historical data, accurate historical data from the Gospels, you're not going to get to Jesus. There's just no but 700 years later, you got to trust it. That's how strong the tradition in Islam is, that they don't care. Like, they believe in divine revelation, very much like fundamentalists here, that screw your Gospels. Who cares about any of that material? We have our own explanation for Isa or, Jesus.
Just to be clear, we agree, historic Jesus, we're going to go to the Gospels and to understand who that was.
Yeah, just the Jesus quotation material. We're not granting that necessarily the disciples actually wrote the gospel.
That's fine. Red letters. Red letters.
Right.
So we can agree that's where we're going to go to.
Right.
Sound good to you?
That sounds excellent.
That sounds excellent. That's what we were hoping.
Yeah, I'm sure that does sound great to them, and that is what they were hoping for, because now they're about to have a discussion about scriptures that are not authentic instead of focusing on the Quran and authentic Sunnah, which are authentically preserved divine revelation. That truly proves their understanding of who Jesus alayhi salam was is incorrect. Hypothetically speaking, even if the Gospels clearly did teach a Trinity, it still wouldn't prove the Trinity to be true, because the Gospels are not authentic, whereas the Quran and authentic Sunnah that are preserved divine revelation tell us that the Trinity is false.
Okay, so here we are, one revelation against another, right? Already, but I think this is fun. I mean, this is fun just watching this already. Before we even review the debate, listening to a Muslim say this. So let us continue.
It's as simple as that. There's nothing else to talk about. And there's definitely nothing else to talk about when it comes to people like this, who have already had the truth conveyed to them and have rejected it. They have been told countless times about what Islam teaches when it comes to all these issues. They reject it. They deny it. They make a living off misrepresenting Islam.
So this is interesting. You can watch the same civil war happen between Muslims too. Christians do it. It's no different in any religion. But the fact that, like, I can actually listen to Christians who are highlighting critical problems with Islam. I could see it. I can apply the same method to their own religion and see problems, and they would disagree. But this guy's like totally sold, right? And he's even going further, like, we shouldn't even talk to these people. We should have nothing to do with them. We've already told them the truth. But obviously the data isn't very convincing. I don't think it's very convincing. I think you're already buying into it. Let us wrap this up, then we'll actually review the debate.
Reaches a point, brothers and sisters, when you need to realize you should close the Bible, open up the Quran, and read where it says, Lakum dinukum waliya din. To you, your religion, and to me, mine. Allah will judge between us on the day of judgment.
Okay, so yeah, you heard it. Okay, you heard it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we saw the prequel to something that I want to say up front to give at least the Christians a little bit of brownie point and making you realize, like, okay, hold on, what are the Muslims saying about this, right? Now, when we listen to the Muslims, who I'm actually going to think to myself, there's some points they make that I do think, hey, that's a critical scholarly kind of perception that they're pointing at. Because the Gospels aren't divine revelation to them, they don't treat them that way, which is the whole, like, this gets into the problem of, I believe, the Islamic dilemma that Christians point out, how the Quran is saying those are sacred books. And obviously when you have them treating them like, they're not really true, they're not accurate. I imagine they think that scribes have butchered the reality of what Jesus really said, or what really tells you the truth about him over time. That Islamic dilemma seems to highlight this problem. And Muslims are good at being willing to listen to critical scholarship. But if it does support that Jesus looks divine in the Gospels, then what? Do they just like find a way to hand wave it? What is the goal, right? What is the goal? And if you can show that Jesus seemed to have been a demigod, which I think is pretty obvious, especially in Luke, Acts, and John, I think you can go all the way back to Mark with this. I think there's important observations you can make about this. Like, then what? What's it do? So I figure we're going to have some fun listening to these guys go back and forth. And the title of their debate is, Did Jesus Teach the Trinity? I feel like that is a pretty high standard of expectation in a debate. To have like that be the debate, not was Jesus considered a god, or because, deities, there's like a nuance you can get into about divinity in the ancient world. No, this is like 300-400 years later doctrine that is trying to hammer out how to understand Jesus. And this is a debate that scholars have to this day about what is the Gospel Mark portraying? What kind of Christology? How do we understand this stuff? In fact, I should have brought my book from the other room. Nope, I got it. Daniel B. Glover, who actually deals with this, Jesus and Other Sons of God, Luke's Christology and Mediterranean Myth, goes over the debate about Jesus' divinity and highlights why the Mediterranean world and other demigods need to be factored in to the divinity. So, all right, enough from me. Everybody, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. Thank you for being here. Make sure you like the video so that, the gods of the algorithm check us out. Hype the video. Do your thing. Good to see you, Baron Bakken. Good to see you. Spank Flaps, the Holy Trinity walks in the bar. The bartender says, sorry, you can't bring your own spirits. Ooh, good one. Good one. Layla, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Shemsu, hell, Derek. Rex, spoiler no, Trinity didn't get added till the faith got to Greece and interacted with Neoplatonism, the monad, God, duad, Christ, and triad, Holy Spirit. Thank you, Rex, for being here. Astro, please review Dr. Duff's show, Jubilee, etc., aka roundtables, public forums, and things. The problem with doing it with Jubilee and other shows like that, and I don't know how it would work. Today, we're going to find out whether or not, I know that like Inspiring Philosophy wouldn't mind me doing this. I don't think God Logic would care either, but I don't know who The Way is. The Way with Brian Davila. Seems like they put this together. Hopefully this doesn't get shut down midstream while I'm reacting, because the big channels like that actually often automatically, you can only listen to so much at a time before you have to make comments. And YouTube, it's out of my hands. So reviewing these live may not be as easy as doing them beforehand and then seeing if they can get past through the process of monetization and stuff like that. All right. If Jesus was a prophet, he was an embarrassing failure for Islam. Leave my elevator alone. Does anyone else see the religious ass? I think they mean ass. The religious as mentally ill. There are some people who've made that comment. I'm not sure. DSM-4? I don't know if that is in there. I imagine there are many people who are mentally ill, but I don't know if believing in stuff that may not be true would be in that vein. Then again, who am I? I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not someone who understands the brain like that. Be interesting to study it. Okay, we got Oscar here. Little Angel, good to see you. Solid HG in the house. Garland's here, good to see you. And then Hive Mind. Salam alaikum, Derek. Good to see you, Hive Mind. Let's get this party started.
These statements of Jesus would be divine claims, which nobody can say because it would be shirk.
Right? Let me finish, bro. Control yourself. If we can show
you haven't spoken about a Trinity.
He put that in there. I know when I'm editing, you got to find those little spots sometimes at the beginning to grab people. Control yourself, he said.
Whatsoever. All you did was try to prove Jesus is God. But you didn't do that either.
That's not.
So I think that would be a more noble, easier to kind of prove that Jesus was a God. And I say a God. Some have even thought he might be Yahweh in some sense, and then others think he's just an agent of Yahweh. There's just there's a lot of different voices out there.
I'll play this game, right?
The Messiah is a they them.
All right, and Allah is a he they, and logically he might be a he she.
All right, cool.
Constantly we're going back to this circle. If it agrees with Islam, therefore we can accept it. If it doesn't, we reject it. We find some ad hoc reason to.
That's kind of actually what the guy that we reviewed on Twitter said. It's almost like you only need the Quran and the Sunnah and nothing else in order to understand the historical Jesus.
Do it.
The servant is the Messiah. But
Thank you.
but he
What
says-
are we doing?
I've already the entire
God.
time. Hey,
Okay, prove it.
Oh, whoa.
No, okay.
Prove it.
Wait, I need
Not
to
really that.
I had to go to the back with my pliers and force that tooth out of your mouth for you to finally say,
Okay.
did the historical Jesus teach the Trinity? So as Muslims, we would be looking at the historical accounts of Jesus, which arguably could be the Synoptics and John. And from that, we would say that nowhere in the Synoptics and John is there anything where Jesus is teaching any kind of triune doctrine that you guys believe in.
So just to be clear, we agree, historic Jesus, we're going to go to the Gospels and to understand who that was.
Yeah, just the Jesus quotation material. We're not granting that necessarily the disciples actually wrote the gospel.
That's fine. Red letters.
Right.
Red letters.
Right.
So we can agree that's where we're going to go to.
Right.
Sound good to you?
that sounds excellent.
That sounds excellent. That's what we were hoping.
Yeah, so
Yeah, specifically if it could be corroborated to him. So
Oh, yeah.
there are certain aspects like that we're not going to grant as it pertains to the red letter stuff, but we'll get to that when you guys get to those arguments.
All right. So which would you?
Now I have a question. I'm coming back to you, fam. I have a question. What would be the reason for discarding some of the red letters? Is it due to the critical scholarly positions that seem to imply like someone put that in the mouth of Jesus? That wasn't really him. Or is it, oh, this agrees with Islam, and then therefore, we can't accept that. So if it's something that doesn't line up with our 700-year later material, then we can't accept that. Or is it the critical scholarship? I wonder if there's a mixture of both in there. Figure I'd ask you. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the chat. I'm really interested in hearing what you think.
Agree that Jesus does teach there's one God.
Of course,
Yep.
it says the Shema, yeah.
Okay, so then you would also agree that he teaches the Father as God, right? Okay, good. So far, fine. So then the question then becomes, is teaches there's one God, says the Father is God. Is there a place he teaches that he is God and that the Holy Spirit is God is really what we need to talk about.
No, not necessarily, because you would also have to show that he's saying that they're co-equal, co-eternal. This is the doctrine of the Trinity, right?
Mhm.
You're not subordinationists, you're not Arians, you're not this, you're not that. You guys hold to co-equal, co-eternal. So that would be what would be expected within the scripture,
Mhm.
right? Which that's what we're arguing.
So she is technically correct because, and even when you look at the Holy Spirit, people talk about the Holy Spirit as almost like an agent or a power from God, and nailing that as its own entity. I really wish we just had a New Testament text that clearly says what later doctrine is trying to nail on to this, like the Nicene observations, what we have in the Trinitarian theology that the Orthodox Church seems to later portray. So this is the funny part that I feel like is going to happen. I'm going to feel like partly truth is going to be on one side. Like I'm going to feel like, oh yeah. I think they kind of get it, but they go too far. And the same, I think, is going to happen with the other side. They're struggling. There's going to be this struggle, I think.
Is not found.
Okay, so let's start with the first thing. Does Jesus teach that he is God?
You can give your argument, right? And
absolutely.
we can rebut.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, there are several places where Jesus demonstrates that he is God. So, for example, in Mark chapter 2, he says that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, we know from Exodus that Yahweh was the Lord of the Sabbath. So whoever is Lord of the Sabbath is Yahweh. That is the earliest gospel. In the synoptic material, we have him claiming a divine title called Lord, Lord, Kitty, Kitty. And as scholars like Robert Bowman Jr. have pointed out, that is a title only attributed to Yahweh in Greek texts from that time or prior. It's throughout the Septuagint, some apocryphal texts. Jesus claims that title for himself. And then, of course, in John, it opens by saying that he is God, and then he affirms that he is. Places like John 5, where he has the same abilities that the Father has, or John 8. Anything you want to add? You two want to add?
Should we break it?
That's a good
Point by point. Start.
Yeah, maybe
Place to
so.
start. Okay.
Yeah, I think some just general responses. One would be when in Mark 2, when Jesus says that he's Lord over Sabbath, the Son of Man is Lord over Sabbath. We just would say, historically speaking, in the Palestinian first century context, he's referring to the Son of Man just generally refers to humanity. Because then we see in Mark 2, 23 to 27, he starts quoting halachic tradition, like in Mark 2, 27, when he says that that even man is made over, or the Sabbath is made for man, not man made for Sabbath. He's quoting Yoma 85b and other like texts that can be found in like Dead Sea Scrolls have the same.
I'm not sure about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know that there is rabbinic literature that does suggest this idea, but I think what Michael Jones is doing, and he's Robert Bowman Jr. I can't imagine this isn't a contested situation or a contested issue. But remember now, they're in the middle of a debate. So he's trying to get the Muslim side. He's trying to gotcha. If you have time to process this stuff and go look up and go see what's going on with Lord of the Sabbath, you're going to notice scholars are probably not going to take that position. I think like Maurice Casey has a completely different position that is in line with this for off the top of my head. And I can't remember exactly what he gives. But anyway, I could be pulling up some of these books and we could get into it. But yeah, I know that the idea that the Sabbath is given to you, not you to the Sabbath, is something that you find in rabbinic literature.
Implied meaning. Next, we see you referenced the double lock, or kyrios in Matthew 7.
Kitties.
Yeah. We just would say it's a double vocative. It's not actually saying it's Adonai Yahweh. You have to assert that Jesus actually elsewhere claims that he's first divine.
Here's the other hard part to think about, right? Coming back to you, everybody. The other hard part to think is this: if Jesus is a prophet, at least portrayed as a prophet in any way, shape, or form, then why wouldn't God speaking through him in some of these circumstances be, he is the representative of his Father, or he is the representative of Yahweh on earth. God is using him for those things. So it's kind of a difficult mess of trying to decipher. And in fact, I think that's why there were so many different kinds of Christianities in the coming centuries, because you can take this different directions on how you interpret the material. I think that it's really telling when you have Orthodox Christians reading Paul, Valentinian Christians reading Paul, Marcionites reading Paul, and all of them are still negotiating their faith, reading the same material, clearly reading them with certain lens, like through a certain lens to understand it. So is this all just later, everybody looking back, trying to patch together and make sense of what they're reading? And is that what's happening?
For the interpretation of that to actually be Adonai Yahweh. Otherwise, we would just say that he's just saying Lord, referring to himself as a human Lord twice.
Okay, so let's start with the Mark thing. So Mark 2. How does that open? It opens with the story of Jesus healing a paralyzed man. Does he identify himself as the Son of Man in Mark 2?
Yeah, in Mark 2, he can identify himself as the Son of Man in places, but as a general reference to himself or humanity as a whole.
Okay, so where does Jesus ever specifically say Son of Man refers to humanity as a whole?
So I'm aware that the gospel authors use the Son of Man and reinterpret it to explicitly be about Jesus. However, we're arguing from a historical context. And in that historical context, in a first century Palestinian or Aramaic language, as we see multiple scholars like able to connect. So
we have to still go to the Gospels to understand how.
But we're arguing it from a historical aspect, not how the gospel authors have now reinterpreted these sayings.
Well, how do you know they reinterpret
Jesus? If we're going to be looking at that, then we'd be looking at the gospel source material and how.
No, how do you know they reinterpret it? Because everywhere when Jesus talks about the Son of Man, he's referring to himself. There's no explicit indication where he refers to the Son of Man as someone distinct from himself. I'll grant you, there are places where it's vague, but there are explicit places where Jesus talks about the Son of Man where it's clearly himself, like in Mark 2.
Right. I don't deny that, and sometimes that the Son of Man can be in reference to himself. However, we see that in Mark 2, the most plausible contextual reading would just be that it's in reference to humans, because he then literally starts quoting Jewish midrashic statements talking about how men are made over the Sabbath. So there's no reason for him to think that it's specifically Jesus alone, when he already tells us in Mark 23 to 27 that it's in reference to all humanity.
So you said in Mark 2, Jesus does identify himself as the Son of Man. Where in the chapter does he show that that context switches?
I literally just explained it. Mark 23-27, he explains that the ruling on men being over Sabbath is general to all of humanity.
It doesn't say that.
So he just did. I gave the arguments for why that is. I already gave an argument.
Yeah, so it doesn't say that man is over the Sabbath. He just says that the Sabbath was created for man to accommodate them, not that man is over the Sabbath, because man is subject to the Sabbath. They have to obey, they have to follow it. But he does say, distinguishing the Son of Man, he says, consequently, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath, which, as he pointed out earlier in the context, we see that Jesus explicitly refers to himself as the Son of Man. Where contextually do you get this idea that Jesus is now changing when he refers to the Son of Man? It's not himself now, but it's everybody.
Yeah, so like I said,
real quick, I feel like they're getting really lost in the weeds on the Son of Man issue. And many scholars have recognized the Son of Man in Daniel may not actually be Jesus. Son of Man is a human. One like a Son of Man is someone who looks like a human. Daniel talks about an angel that way that looks like a human, but they're not a human. They're divine. So you do have people who look like a Son of Man. You have Son of Man, which is just a human being. You have Jesus, who's identified as the Son of Man at times. And I do think that, you go to Mark, 13, Mark 14, roughly around the time where he's on trial with the Jewish trial. And he says, you will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, talking to Caiaphas. Is Jesus talking about himself? Or is he talking about the Son of Man that is predicted in Daniel that's supposed to come? I wish it just said it very clearly. I'm talking about me. But one could go, well, he is implying that he's the Messiah. Well, is the Messiah in this case the Son of Man that is supposed to come on the clouds? Is that what's being implied? Obviously, cloud riders, you have that all the way back in the ball cycle. Yahweh was a cloud rider. So now they're trying to equivocate or say Jesus is Yahweh because he's going to ride on the clouds, and that's the Son of Man. You can see the logic behind what they're making the reasoning, but is that what it's really saying? That's where it's interesting. I did a series of reactions to Sean McDowell and William Lane Craig on the question of, is Jesus God in Mark? And they responded almost every single one of those. They did every single one of William Lane Craig and Sean McDowell's views, from James McGrath, Richard Carrier, Richard C. Miller. My goodness, who else did I get in that? I had several scholars, M. David Litwa. They all go in and show you how messy this is. It's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. So there is a point where actually I think the Muslim here has at least a point in terms of seeing that it isn't always Son of Man as Jesus. There is a nuance here. I think they're arguing about this whole Sabbath issue, though, and what's going on. And there is rabbinic literature later, though, that depicts this. I haven't seen anything in the Dead Sea Scrolls that talks about this. He did mention that earlier. I don't know if that was a slip or what, but anyway, we're nerding out here, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're not into theology, or at least like hearing different things that are within the bubble, this isn't a show for you. But I'm interested in hearing what goes on between two completely different groups of people who are arguing for their religion. And I'm just sitting back here going, well, what do critical scholars think?
When he's quoting in Mark 27 that even men or I don't know the exact verbatim quote. He's quoting
I'll read it.
Khalid, yeah, if you
it's right here. It says, and Jesus was saying to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath.
Right. So
consequently, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
This quotation can also be found verbatim, found in Jewish midrashic statements and texts that predate Jesus, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. They have the same quotation and the same theology, and the theology entails that men are over Sabbath, as in they can do certain things like picking grain for emergency if they have to eat.
Yeah, I'd be curious to get that source that predates the Christian. It wouldn't be shocking if it was, because you do get this two powers in heaven motif that starts to come along, and humans who get elevated to divine status, like we see with Jesus. I mean, it's a messy world. For those who know of Metatron, you can see there's Enochic literature and Metatron and two powers in heaven. And even in the rabbinic sources, they talk about there's another throne that was a guy sitting on next to God in heaven. He's also seated on a throne. So it gets
that's why
it gets messy. It gets messy.
Like I said, in the historical context of the first century Palestinian Aramaic speaker, Son of Man, Bari Nosh, can also just mean humanity. So we have no reason to explicitly be taking this as only Jesus.
And that's the problem that we're having here. Because remember, we talked about the historical Jesus and you guys appealed to the Synoptic Gospels and John. And so when
But we didn't
one of the-
appeal to its authors, though. So we were very serious with it.
You said the Synoptic Gospels.
No. Yeah, insofar as the red letters, it was insofar as the red letters.
That's my point, sir.
But from a historical aspect, or look at it from a historical
The
aspect.
red letters in the Synoptic Gospels, you have Mark 2, where Jesus in context refers to himself as the Son of Man and continues the conversation. So you said that you have no reason to think or to conclude that Jesus is referring to himself alone as the Son of Man, being Lord over the Sabbath, but you do contextually, that's what he's talking
So
about.
I want to be very clear here. When we're saying that we're
Think about how much effort's going into this because of a story that is talking about Jesus. There's a lot of effort going into this one thing because you could see the implications for it, right? That help lead to the conclusion of him being divine. Because right now they're just trying to get him to be divine. They're just arguing right now to make Jesus divine. And I find that really interesting. I mean, the debate shouldn't have been, did Jesus teach the Trinity, though? I'm going to keep it real. Like that's a high task. I'll be shocked if they actually get to it.
granting the gospel material, we're talking about the Jesus material from a historical aspect. That's why I made it very clear. We're not saying that the disciples actually wrote the gospels, because we're viewing the gospels from a historical standpoint. And if we're viewing it from a historical standpoint, then the argument would show that the Son of Man here is not in reference to Jesus alone, especially because historically speaking, the earliest gospel material never had Son of Man in
So
reference.
do you
And I know
agree,
IP's not.
do you agree that the Gospel of Mark identifies Jesus as the Son of Man?
Yeah, we never are arguing anything about what the authors of the text view. I don't even care what
Do
the
you
author
agree
Mark
that
views
Mark-
Jesus as, because that's not anything to do with the discussion.
You already agreed
Up to date.
Do you agree the author of Mark 2 has Jesus
It has nothing
identified-
to do with it has nothing to do with
Listen to what he's saying.
Do you agree that Mark 2, in the whole chapter, Jesus explicitly identifies himself in the Son of Man when he's healing the paralyzed man?
I'm saying-
and topic.
literally.
No,
that's very relevant.
No, it's not,
Because
because
it's
the whole
contextual.
point is that we're talking about the historic Jesus, not the interpretation of the historic Jesus as it pertains to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John.
How do you know who the historical Jesus is?
Just straight, but before we continue, you already agreed that fine, we'll go with the right letters.
That's what y'all.
Right.
But we recorded.
He's asking, but real quick. You said we'll go to that, and then he clarified there's going to be in reference to the historical things that can be predated back to Christ, right? So when you reference back the synoptics in general, and you say, "Hey, what do we need to know about Christ?" He's sort of like pedaling back onto that standard.
No,
essentially.
I'm going on what Jesus explicitly said about himself, which you agree. If you don't think he actually identified himself as the Son of Man, why are you appealing to Mark where Jesus identifies himself as the Son of Man in there?
We're not appeal to the verse. You guys put the verse.
With the verse.
I'm okay. So I'm lost. So we go
Yeah.
back to the back to the question.
Yeah.
Where do we get the historical Jesus from?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we can get relevant data from the Bible over the historical Jesus, but there's also other gospel material that's going to have it as well. Like I know IP is familiar with the Kernel Gospel of Thomas, also having Q quotes and the consensus of scholarship.
It's the second century at best.
Well, the consensus of scholarship holds.
There are scholars who think that you could say it's second century. I mean, but Gospel of John could be second century along with Luke Acts, which I think it is second century. So I think John comes after Luke Acts. I think we're already dealing with second century material with that. So there's nothing that doesn't bother me at all if Luke and John are second century and you have, the Gospel of Thomas somewhere around that period, whether you want to say it's after John, like Goodacre, who also flirts with the idea that, Elaine Pagels and several other scholars have hinted at thinking that John is actually reacting to Thomas. And there's good reasons internally to think that could be likely. I mean, there's no way to prove any of that. They keep going on about the Son of Man, Son of Man, Son of Man. That's a disputed passage. It is a critical, scholarly, disputed passage. And I think that's really, is Jesus claiming this authority? Sure. Why not? I don't see the big problem with it. Even if you grant it, it doesn't seem to bother me one bit at all. But I'm not really sure exactly what the critical scholars would say in great depth about this whole issue and why there's an Aramaic formula that seems to be translated into Greek. And this is why you see some contention here. So now they're going to be shifting to other gospels like Q, he said, which is another interesting ground to argue over.
That it has pre-synoptic independent material from the synoptics. So it's not dependent on the synoptics. So even if we said that the Gospel of Thomas, every part of it was made in the second century, Boo-hoo, because it's still independent of the synoptics.
This is irrelevant to the main
So
Yeah.
that has absolutely He's asking us, where do we get our historical information of Jesus?
Yes.
I just told you the Gospel of Thomas has historical information of Jesus, and it's independent of the Gospels.
So gospel.
Your
Thomas
four
is correct
canonical
on
Gospels.
Jesus.
I don't even need to go
Ah.
to the four canonical Gospels.
Okay, maybe they're saying material that could potentially be in there that's independent of the four. Mark Goodacre wrote a good book on this, where he sees that the material in the Gospel of Thomas is dependent upon all four Gospels. Some scholars would, if you take the argument that John is reacting to Thomas could still be, having Mark, Matthew, and Luke in it. So John could be reacting after Thomas and engaging that material. But either way, it's not completely independent. So I'm not sure. Seems like he's just trying to win the argument here, but I think that Goodacre's done great work on this that should be studied.
Look at
Is gospel of Thomas correct?
But that doesn't think it's not like is a thing reliable.
no, exactly. Where we're
I'm
talking
not a thing is just reliable, isn't
Yeah,
right?
so
It's qualified.
It is. Is the gospel of Thomas where we can get our true?
it has relevant historical.
I got you.
So that it gets. Does it have super?
I don't know why you keep going with this.
Let me tell you.
I'm not getting a clear answer.
You ask if it's true. I got you.
Yeah. So
Hold on, guys. Did you know that over 80% of people that watch these videos are not subscribed? And that's the best way to
Ladies and gentlemen, over 80% of you who watch my live streams on MythVision are not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe right now if you're watching.
support this channel. So let's give the audience a second to subscribe. And if they want to financially support us,
If you're interested in financially supporting us, you could do that too. But seriously, the way with Brian Davila, don't want to take credit away from them. They just reminded me to mention to you. But look, let's continue.
they could become a member. All right. Now let's get back to the discussion.
does the gospel of Thomas give us correct historical
I
information
got
of
you.
Jesus?
So it's not going to be a yes or no. That will be a false dichotomy. It will be qualified. Meaning, for example, Gospel of John. Gospel of John has something that can be corroborated. Does that mean that the entire gospel is not true? No. Right. So what that means is that if it is corroborated, we can reference back to it. Right. If it's not qualified, if it can't be corroborated, then we can reject it.
Good.
For example, if I could just add on to his point, when the Quran says that Jesus was born of a virgin, and that's true, it doesn't now, according to you, mean that everything in the Quran is now true. Because
I wanna-
it's something that's true.
I want to use a term,
This is wild. This is just wild to me.
phrase you guys love to use. Now we need a symmetry breaker here. So how do we know what is the good historical information in the Gospel of Thomas and what isn't?
Well, the material that parallels with Q.
Okay, so now Q is the authority on who this is. So is Q the authority, the hypothetical Q that we have no documents for, that some scholars have sort of put together what they think it is, that is now the authority on who these.
Even if we granted your understanding of it being a hypothetical document that we can't just actually obtain and get a holistic view of it, that you would still be appealing that Matthew uses source material outside of Mark that's as old as Mark.
I'm fine. Let's just move it. So
We're appealing to the historical source materials that the gospel authors are using.
if we go through Mark and we go, okay, well, Jesus clearly claims to be the Son of Man. How do we know he actually said that? What is the actual foundation, the authority we can use to determine who the historical Jesus was, so we can know what he taught?
Yeah, if you're asking specifically from our perspective and not just the argument at hand, because the argument at hand isn't from our actual perspective, we were just giving an argument. But from our actual perspective, you're asking us what is the historical Jesus material we would get. It's that the source material that the gospel authors use, the synoptics, which we can get based upon the fact that we know that they're anonymous, independent works, and they independently both use the same source material. They use Mark as a medial, and they have a secondary source material that they have a literary dependence on, which we know based upon their literary details, the way that they're quoting.
So where?
I got you. So
Thank you.
I'm building up. What he's saying is correct, but to render it,
Well, Goodacre would obviously not agree with the Q position. Yes, they have common source material, Mark or Matthew and Luke, but obviously you have the Farrer hypothesis, which isn't being factored in here. And it seems like Q's a really important source for the Muslim side here, because Q at least strips more of the mythical elements you find in the gospel material. At least for most Q reconstructions, you don't have as much legend and myth in them as you would in Q. So they're looking for the least tampered with, yet they still accept the virgin birth, which is odd. Mark doesn't have that, but I guess they would suspect that Q has the virgin birth, I suspect. I don't know what the reconstruction of Q looks like as far as virgin birth material goes. I just find it really odd that some of the teachings you do find in the Quran that do talk about Jesus are like things that you'd go, well, that's like stock legend. You know, we would have that of several figures who have divine births like that.
Down to the simplest point is going to be the historical critical method, aka that which can be corroborated, early attested to, right? That which has we can apply the criteria of the similarity, which IP should be familiar with. If all these criteria can be implemented upon a text, right, then we can determine that text to be reliable.
Okay,
Right.
so what is the source that we can go to get the accurate historical information about Jesus so we can know what he said and actually start this conversation?
Is your question more of like one specific book that we're all going?
Well, no, because we use 4. I mean, we use Matthew, Mark, Luke,
yeah.
John. You guys
Is that
are
what-
saying no, and
They're using Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
No, I
Where are
understand.
you guys using?
Yeah, we're using the relevant historical data.
Which
I think
ones?
that's the bit-
That this is a really big freaking question. Is this not a big question? It depends on who you're talking to scholar wise, right? Some scholars think it's hopeless. I've got the next quest for the historical Jesus right here. Okay. James Crossley helped, edit this, and it's a pretty good sized book. There's a ton of scholars in here. Some of our favorites that we've had on the channel. Golly, there's a ton here. So let me just name you some scholars. Halvar Moxnes, Brandon Massey, Beyond the Jewish Jesus Debate by Adele Reinhardt, Helen K. Bond, Rafael Rodriguez, Chris Keith, Mark Goodacre, Joanne Taylor, Deanne Galbraith, Stephen Young, Paula Fredrickson, James Crossley, Matthew G. Whitlock, John Kloppenborg, Sarah Rowlands, Anders Runeson, Christopher B. Zeichman, which I really look forward to getting him on at some time soon, Robert J. Miles, Janelle Peters, Robin Faith Walsh, we've had her on. If you read her section is called City and Country. She gives one sentence. She says, we only know what the author thought about Jesus. You can't even ascertain the historical Jesus in the Gospels, according to her. And she's contributing to the next quest for the historical Jesus. In it, she says, trying to get to the Jesus, golly. So both sides, you have one that's maximalist that's saying the whole 4 Gospels are really portraying exactly what Jesus, we can trust them. They're reliable. They're historical. And they are giving us the Jesus of history. The other side's using the term history, but they're very, very selective, which I think is what critical scholars would be, is very selective. They understand the Gospels are loaded with theology. They understand that these are the evangelists, if we can call the authors that, giving their own spin on Jesus. A lot of it looks like Pauline material onto Jesus, or later Christian doctrine into the sayings of Jesus, or whatever. Several scholars dispute some of this stuff. Do some of these sayings go all the way back? The few that I've even heard of, when I talk to Bart Ehrman, is clear, and Del C. Allison Jr., the one main one is, you will not have gone through all the cities in Israel before the Son of Man comes. Well, that's not the Gentile mission. That's the local disciple mission. That they will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's how soon the end was supposed to happen. The Gospel of Matthew records this. Is that going back to Jesus? It's embarrassing. Many scholars think this fossil does go back to the guy. But the reason they do is because it's embarrassing. It shows like a really early development of apocalyptic thought that maybe the Gentile mission wasn't even on the scene yet, and there's a fossil that shows up in Matthew. Is it something that goes back to Jesus? No one will know for sure. We'll never know. So you have one side that wants to use history, but it sounds like they're very selective, and of course they have to anchor that through their own religion first. Is this okay with our religion first? Because I would immediately call out the virgin birth. I think I could get the Christian side to go, hey, look, would you follow what I'm saying here? That if we're going to start talking about legendary material, or we don't trust this material going back, the birth of Jesus, there's tons of births of divine beings. You don't agree with me, Michael Jones, or God Logic, or I'm not sure what her name is on their side, but wouldn't you say that would be a first thing to probably go in terms of history? And when you read critical scholars, they would say that's one of the first things to go, is the birth of Jesus. But the Muslim side can't let that go because it shows up in the Quran. And you just see the tug of war. But anyway, they're wrestling over like, well, what is that material? And they throwing around Q and then Thomas sayings and like being very, very peculiar about the material. And they're just saying, we want all of it.
Really, any source that could be corroborated as it pertains to
Just name one.
So let me explain it.
Q. So you guys are working off a Q.
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole point
So-
is that
so-
there's
And by the way, we can go on to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, no issue, but it's not going to be unqualified.
Okay, so
Right.
we can get Q is where we get the hypotheticals Q, teachings of Jesus. Can we do that? Can we start there?
No, but real quick before we move on to that, and I have no issue in just Mark 2. There's no issue with that, right? We can adjust that.
What?
But, specifically regarding Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, they can contain historical information, right? And you would agree, for example, I don't know if you would, but there would be some aspect of John, for example, that wouldn't be reliable, right? Right? That is
we
the
wouldn't
case.
agree with that. That's it.
Okay, that's fine, but
That's reliable gospel.
that's what the scholarship says, right? But the point is, we can go ahead and adjust Mark 2. No issue with that, right? So someone bearing the name Yahweh, right? Does that make them Yahweh?
Yeah, it means that they are.
Yes.
Okay, so
No one has the name Yahweh except Yahweh alone. That's not Nehemiah 9:6.
okay, so when it comes to Exodus, when it comes to other prophets, when it says that Yahweh will do something, and then prophets do that thing,
Yeah.
right? Does that make them Yahweh?
That's agency.
Okay, so what is the distinction in Christ being an agent of God?
Because very good. Because Christ isn't just an agent of the Father, but he claims himself to be Yahweh himself.
That's a very claimed question.
Let me finish.
Right, you're right.
I know, but you asked me, all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we can discuss that. But I'm giving you the difference between an agent and Jesus, right? So an agent cannot claim to be Yahweh himself, cannot claim the prerogatives of Yahweh, but Jesus does. That's the symmetry breaker. So you'll never see, like, for example, Aaron, when, the example where Aaron takes the staff and when Yahweh says, I'll do it, Aaron does it. You'll never see Aaron say, I'm Yahweh, or claim to be Yahweh, or, whatever. Jesus does.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're familiar with it clearly. Obviously, they know that whenever the verse is being quoted, it says that Yahweh is literally the one who's holding the rod in his hand, but obviously it's Aaron, the one who's holding the rod in his hand. So we would just say that's divine agency, yeah. But back to what Time was saying, you would have to obviously show first that Jesus actually does claim any kind of divinity for them to be a differential.
Of course. So you do agree that is a symmetry breaker, though, right?
No, because for example, we like when you say divine prerogatives, you mean divine properties?
Yes, of God. So like being all powerful, all knowing, judge of heaven and earth.
So okay.
Resurrecting the dead, first and last.
So when it comes to knowing all things, would you agree that's a divine prerogative, right?
Yes. And so that's what I'm asking. Like if Jesus is claiming to have the divine attributes or prerogatives of God, like the things only God does, the claims that only God can make, would you agree that would be a symmetry breaker between an agent of Yahweh and Yahweh?
No, because we see other instances where others other than Yahweh, other than Jesus, right, would quote unquote be predicated with these prerogatives. For example, 1 John 2:20 said that the disciples know all things.
No,
it says that.
No, that's qualified.
Okay, let's bring it out.
It's qualified. Yeah. So what we're trying to say is that if Jesus claims to be Yahweh, okay, that could only mean he's either lying, ignorant, or he is actually Yahweh.
So, or there's a fourth option. That can I give you in Jewish monotheism in the first century, the legal status, the status of a sender is the same as an agent.
But the sender, the agent, the can never claim to be the king, as he knows.
He has
never claimed to be Yahweh.
He has the same exact status of it. For example,
Well,
I'm quoting you actual reference. This is found in like Nedarim 72b. These are midrash.
I don't care about that.
The thing is, I'm saying there's a fourth option you could say from Jewish monotheism that's agency still, because Jewish monotheism allows this. Which I would, if I can just finish, please. And we can find this example in 1 Samuel 25 when David wants to go marry Abigail, and so he sends his servants, and then the servants go to Abigail, and Abigail prostrates and speaks in the singular in the Hebrew, as if you're speaking to David, but you're speaking to the servants, because the servants have been sent by David, so they have the exact same status as David, while not actually being him.
Do the servants claim to be David?
It doesn't.
Hold on. Do the servants claim to be David?
They are called David.
Please. Do the servants claim?
Not in this instant, but it was
exactly. If they did, what would happen to them?
Nothing.
Why are we skipping over?
So this isn't getting to the Trinity clearly, obviously the debate topic, but I think it's messy when you get to like two powers in heaven stuff. You do have representatives like an angel of Yahweh constantly appears in the Old Testament. that isn't supposed to be Yahweh himself, but an angel of, a representative of. It's messy. This is messy. And I think that the theology that tries to hammer this out in Trinitarian form is something that you see later Christians develop. It's also interesting just to note, like, what if we're just dealing with one gospel? If all we had was the Gospel of Mark and Paul's letters, do we think, like Paul's authentic letters, you think anyone would have hammered out a Trinitarian, creed? I doubt it. I really do doubt it. I think once you factor in all of the different gospel material, which is various different theologies that are probably mixed into this, and you see all that develops in the letters as well, you start to get at least the soup, ingredients from the soup. And as Neoplatonism and other things start to come in, you could see why people who are reading this material are able to construct such a view, to make sense of it. I mean, you do have two powers in heaven, which is not Trinitarianism. You got two powers in heaven theology in Jewish teachings, like Jewish material. Two powers, not three, but two. They're just adding an additional power here in this case, making the Holy Spirit another person of the Trinity, etc. But anyway, it just seems like they're going back and forth, and they're trying to talk about agency. I've heard a lot of scholars talk about Jesus was representative of Yahweh on earth, but wasn't necessarily Yahweh. I don't know where to land on this in terms of what they're really trying to do in the gospel material, especially by the time you get to Luke and John. For example, when we compare the Gospel of John to Euripides, as Dennis MacDonald has done showing the Dionysian stuff, Dionysus is literally thrice born Dionysus. He was born from Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. He is a representative of his father Zeus on earth. And yet he's separate, and yet he's a god. But that brings you into a polytheistic system. What's going on with this two-power stuff? Are they flirting with something that... Or is monotheism the wrong term to even use at this time in history? Are we all worried about monotheism? But like when it talks about the Shema, is it just saying you only have one God, but there are other gods? Just like you're supposed to worship just this one, though. But then when you have that problem, you then have God sending an angel of himself, an angel of the Lord, a representative of himself. So Christians often identify that as Jesus as well in the Old Testament. But anyway,
if the servants claim, go ahead. If the servants claim to be the king, you said nothing would happen to them?
No.
That's called what was it called? Treason. Treason. There you go.
Yeah.
That's treason, dude. You can't. A servant cannot claim to be a king. He'll be put to death.
Yeah,
Or
only in the sense of his status.
Let me
It's not-
So we see there's you're bringing up examples where people represent the king, but they are not the king themselves. They cannot claim to be the king themselves. So this is we're not when it comes to Jesus is not claiming to just be a servant of the Father. He claims to be God. He claims to have the divine prerogatives that only God has, the titles that only God has, actions that only God has. So would you agree that this is a symmetry breaker between a mere agent? So an agent can claim to be God?
Yeah, and I'm giving an example that she gave in 1 Samuel, right? Where she calls the people, the servants, he says, my servant. So she identifies them as David. She says that they're David, although David isn't actually present. Okay, so that's number one.
Can you bring up the reference?
Yeah,
it's 1 Samuel 25, 39 to 41.
Let's read that. And what's your point on this?
And then the point is that she calls them David, although David isn't present. So they bear the name David. They identified as David, although David isn't there.
Yeah, can you? Okay, so there's two different things here. Number one.
Can I read it?
Yeah, go ahead and read that.
Okay, so then David sent word to Abigail.
Sorry. Let me go along with you.
Yeah.
Hey, quick break from the conversation. I want to give a big shout out to Logos. So Logos is an app that helps people.
Logos been making the rounds, ladies and gentlemen. I recommend Cross Bible, my buddy Steven, and his work. That's what I recommend, his website.
With her face to the ground and said, I am your servant, and I'm ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Right? So she identifies the people as the servant.
Wait, I'm confused. Hold on, let me see. So the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel and spoke to her, saying, David has sent us to you to take you as his wife. And she arose and bowed with her face to the ground and said, Behold, your maidservant is a servant woman to wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Then Abigail hurried and arose, and she rode on a donkey with her 5 young women who went about with her, and she went after the messengers of David and became his wife. Where does it say that she called them David?
She said she bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I am your servant.
Uh-huh.
So they address the people as a singular servant, which is David.
Well, no, where does it say? No, see, this is why we got to read, bro. You said that she called them David.
No, I said, who's the servant in this case?
The servants are the messengers that David sent, and she's
Right.
their servant.
Wait, servant with a singular? Who's the servant?
Look, it says this.
What it represents?
Look, this is what it says. She says, it says, David sent us, yada, yada, yada. Let's go to what she said. Behold, she says, behold, your maid servant. Servant is singular. She's
Right.
the servant.
Yeah, to who?
To the servants of David.
But you is a singular. It's not a plural.
So, the you
So the you is in reference to only David.
No, it's not. Let me go ahead and respond to this, because in Exodus
No.
20, when it says you shall have no other gods before you, that you is in the singular, but it's referring to the nation of Israel, correct?
Yeah, that's just because Israel can be referred to as a one. Yeah.
So you can have the servants be referred to as one, even though it's referring to a plurality of persons.
But
So
the thing
it
is, you
doesn't call
see a
them David.
difference. You see, because
What's the difference?
after
dude, what in the world, man? This is getting deep. They're just getting into the weeds. They can't even agree on the David stuff, right? Which is important. This is part of debating. But like, I guess the Muslim side is trying to point out that other representatives did things on behalf of Yahweh. But this is like a lot of time gets wasted in this kind of back and forth. I feel like speeding it up, but I feel like we're going to miss some of the juicy stuff that might be there. Let me see. It doesn't show you like any viral moments where we should go click to. Let's go a little bit further, because I almost want to skip. Actually, let's get a vote. Hey fam, are we skipping ahead? Yeah, there's something about someone said something about the disciples were low-key stupid. I saw something like that, actually. Should we skip to that part and then just rock out from there and see what happens? Because I'm not listening to this whole thing. I do not have all day to be listening to this. I'm not going to lie. Let me do this stupid. Yeah, so all right, vote from you. If you're down, I'll move ahead. We'll get to a whole different topic. Yes, move ahead to like 50 minutes where it starts to get kind of juicy. There's supposed to be a few funny spots or something like that. Are you guys down? Everybody put yes in the chat if you're wanting to do that. Please. Let's see. Fucking, I'm not going to be on long, bro. I'm not going to be on long today. I will have you on at some point. I promise you. Yes. Okay. I got enough yeses to make me feel like, all right, let's skip ahead a little bit. Because it's getting like really down in the weeds over like, can you represent David and not be David, but kind of be David, but you're not really David? You know, they're trying to do that with God, right? They're trying to say, well, they're representatives of God, they're agents of God, they're doing work on behalf of God, like the angel of the Lord does, but they aren't actually God, but they are part of God. You can do this with wisdom literature, by the way. Sophia gets brought up, and in fact, the Q material, which they started to bring up, Kloppenborg goes over this in Q. There's a feminine pronoun attributed to Sophia, the wisdom, that is related to the same kind of motif for the angel of the Lord that you find. So what do you do? Here we go.
Now, you would agree that the reason why I increased them in belief in the resurrection is because that was prophesied, right? Right? And they expected that.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that seeing who you saw this man die,
Right.
and then you see him alive again.
But
That right there.
but part of the reason is because that's what was expected to.
Well, Paul says it is written. You know, he literally in 1 Corinthians 15. Now, I get the logic here. I would actually agree with God's logic that if you take a historical approach and you think, well, why would they believe he rose from the dead? They're probably searching the scriptures after the fact. Now, of course, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts here. But in 1 Corinthians 15, he says it is written, I'm pulling it up here, get the precise quote the best I can. Okay. In 1 Corinthians 15, for if the dead are not raised, if Christ has not been raised, where's it at? It is written. I'm looking in the whole chapter right now. Somewhere early on in the chapter. Let me get the exact quote. Where in 1 Corinthians 15 does Paul say the death, burial, and I think he even says 3 days and third day are prophesied in Scripture? Which, by the way, if you go look for this prophecy in Scripture, you know, you get like pieces. Yeah, for I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. That's the very opening of 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3-4. So he died for our sins, 1 Corinthians 15:3. He was raised on the third day, 1 Corinthians 15:4. And of course, he's trying to quote maybe a patchwork of scriptures, but that it was believed that it was prophesied. That seems to be what Paul says. So let's see what they say. Oh, we got a super chat before we go. Dan Dave RC, thank you so much, Dan, for the super chat. I went to this Itachi show on TikTok and asked her about dual carnane, and she said it was some black African dude and not Alexander, and then Allah knows best, which is their way of ending a conversation. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, it is. It's ridiculous. At least the Cyrus position is more in line with the scriptural approach, because Daniel gets brought up a lot, and King Cyrus, the Messiah, gets brought up in the book of Daniel. But no, the Alexander romance, this is so obvious. I think, Dan, you probably saw my video. I did a deep dive into this. Dor Carnane, and I believe it's Surah 18, Surah 7. It's the same chapter as Surah Al-Kahf, so the cave, the sleepers of the cave. In there, you have so many legends and hagiographies, but by the time the Quran is being written, Alexander the Great is a monotheist. He believes in one God. Obviously, we go historical, he doesn't. But by the time the 7th century, Christians have already reworked him to make him a one God monotheist believer. And in the Alexander romance myths, or legends, if you want to call them that, specifically the ones that are Syrian. There's a Syrian version, there's a Greek there's various versions of the Alexander romance, but he's a monotheist. So when the Muslims inherit this, they're not like, oh, those horns, the dual horns that you would see from Alexander the Great. Let me pull this up so everybody could see this. Alexander the Great horns. We have actual coins, by the way, of this guy's, inscriptions real fast. Let's check this out. So here is horns of Amun, right? You have the god Amun. Well, this coin is depicting Alexander the Great. He has two ram horn, the horns on his head. They're two horns, right? Alexander the Great, his legends were phenomenal. They traveled everywhere. They were so important that even the Gilgamesh epic influenced them. And I think there's Gilgamesh influence that finds its way into the Quran as well, due to Islamic scholarship that I've been studying as well. So you have the dual horned one, right? It didn't take you to the site, that the Wikipedia site when I clicked it. Either way. So yeah, you have Alexander the Great, horns of Alexander. Well, this is a pagan god that he clearly is divinely born of, which Amun is also Zeus. Zeus Amun, he is a son of Zeus. That's how they're caricaturing him. They're like trying to portray him. But later, these horns are significant as a monotheist. They do not carry the pagan, polytheistic, earlier symbolism they once did once the Christians start to rewrite the legends of Alexander in the Romance. That's important. So if you're looking for Alexander the Great, dual carnot, here we go. Let's do this. There's let me do MythVision just to show people. I've got the documentary. You would think it'd pop up here. I'd have to pull up YouTube to show you. Got a documentary. If you go on YouTube and look it up, look, does he agree? He probably does. I don't know. Was Alexander the Great actually? I don't think he probably would. That's Yasser Qadi. There's another Islamic apologist who has said, he goes, yeah. This right here is a legend in the Quran. Clearly, probably isn't accepted by many of the online Muslims who watch, but I found that and I was pretty impressed by it. So I think it's silly to make that argument that he's not Alexander the Great. And the best they do is try to move to Cyrus the Great. But the Cyrus the Great material was only argued by Muslims within the past few centuries. So it doesn't go back to the beginning of it. It's actually the Alexander legend. So there are Alexander romance, but there's a specific one that is called the Alexander legend, which is a spin-off of the Alexander romance. In that, it has so many parallels that go on with the story of Dhul-Qarnayn. And here's the thing, the Muslim apologist that I heard say this, which I was impressed. I was like, okay, cool. Like, he sees it. He recognized these were stories. These were just stories of teaching you wisdom from them, not to be taken literal as history. But I guess some Muslims probably don't accept that. Again, Dan, thank you again for the second one. Dhul-Qarnayn is to Alexander what Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is to Abraham Lincoln. It is a fake, bogus story found in the Quran. It's a legend. Yeah, if you take it literally, like if you don't just take it as fictive, hagiography, legend, whatever, you take it literal, the bubble's going to pop. Bubble's going to pop. I'm getting noises on my Facebook. Let me close that. All right. Let me continue reacting to, because I think the sweet spot in this debate / thing is about to happen. But yeah, thank you for that, Dan. You are correct, I think, especially for those who take it to the bank literally. Cyrus was a monotheist, actually. According to Jewish teaching, they had him as a monotheist. He believed in the God of Israel. That's how they portray him. Now, history is going to tell you a different story. But even the Jews saw him as, oh, he honored our God, the God of Israel, and it was due to the God of Israel, things like that. So you get this again with him in Jewish literature. But yes, he was a pagan like Alexander the Great, even though that's not how he gets portrayed. He becomes a Messiah in Jewish material. Okay, let me share my screen here. Back to the debate, and we'll see what happens. Everybody sees that? Yeah.
To be,
I would say that as they got understanding more so later on, that continued to solidify their belief.
Amazing.
Because that's what you see. You see them begin to quote Old Testament, like, oh yes, this is what he meant, and this is what he said after they give revelation.
Amazing. So according to you guys, the disciples are saying, hey, this is what he meant. So according to you guys, for the disciples, it was unclear prior to the resurrection, right?
No.
Was it clear or unclear?
For them, they're So look, we can look at the scripture and we can see what Jesus is saying is pretty clear. But for the disciples, it's they did not understand it. It wasn't
beautiful.
They was missing the mark.
Yeah, beautiful.
But he's asking how if the Old Testament
They're fallible.
That's just a really, really poor argument. So I'm aware that the sky is blue and the grass is green, and I'm very well studied on this, but I think that the grass is actually blue and the sky is actually red. That's just very, very absurd.
So the Muslim side has a point that if this was clearly prophesied, like this was obviously something people were supposed to recognize and were supposed to see, then nobody should have missed that he was supposed to come and die and rise from the dead and all of that. And that's the point that they're getting at. This gets deeper into the weeds, though, because if the disciples themselves don't understand, and Jesus is speaking so clearly, I just go right back to fiction. Whoever's writing this story to you, the reader, wants you to see what Jesus was saying and wants you to see that the disciples were dummies or dimwits. They don't get it. But that's on a literary level. And I don't think maybe the Muslim side would agree with me on this. I don't know. I don't know what they would say, but I think that never gets factored into these discussions, because this side that you see on the screen right now buys them as historically reliable and as what happened, what actually occurred, what you're reading took place. So when you're rationalizing it through a historical lens like that, you have to go, well, the disciples, it was right in front of them, but they never really got it. They never really got it. Yet it's a good question the Muslims are asking in a way, is like, but dude, it's in your scriptures. Like, everybody's heard the scriptures. Everybody's been reading them forever. How come nobody noticed this? They should have known this obvious fact that it's prophesied the Messiah would come and die and rise. Now, you can find evidence of this. I did a video against Wes Huff not long ago showing how Jews did look to scriptures and find ways to pesher and whatnot to apply this to the suffering of their servant or a messianic figure. I'm just making the point. It didn't seem to be so obvious.
If it's very, very well understood,
Do you agree
wouldn't
there's flat
just expect
earthers?
the opposite.
Do you agree there's flat earthers?
Yeah, there's flat.
Okay, yeah. See, there
Right.
it's very clear the earth is round, and yet there are still people that believe the earth is flat.
So the disciples are low-key stupid?
Just
Okay, before he answers that, I think the Bible teaches flat earth. And I know Michael Jones wouldn't probably agree with me. I don't know. I don't know what he thinks about that. But I think, yeah, the Bible teaches the earth is flat. The cosmology is flat. You have a solid rakia, the solid dome in the sky. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff there.
Honestly,
Wow,
man. Wow, man.
that's
Yeah.
the point.
That's crazy.
The disciples were low-key stupid. Israel was low-key
crazy.
stupid.
Israel was
Israel was tripping when God came to Egypt and showed his power and his magnificence, and they still went to Egypt. You can say there's a clip all you want. This is stirring the pot, bro. You talking about Israel? Israel was freaking dumb. When God would reveal themselves in Egypt, showed his power, brought them out
Dude, it's all literary, ladies and gentlemen. It's all literary.
of slavery, gave them food from heaven, and they still griped against him.
The fact that that's like, it's crazy how, I don't know. Did you believe this like I did? Were you like, I bought this. This really happened as it's described? It'd be very hard for me to like believe that a group of people would see miracle after miracle after miracle like that, and then still be like, man, is this real? Is this true? Or even like gripe about it. It's like, dude, there's no way. I couldn't buy it personally. I couldn't buy it. But again, I approach the Bible literary. You guys know.
They still spoke against God. They were dumb.
That's what the text is trying to show.
It's just really
Yes,
weird.
she's right. That's what the text is trying to show. But you can only go to the text. You know, you can't go beyond that into this like, really, we're playing the movie back and we can see what really happened.
Your earliest Christians all just completely rejected that notion and all understood.
Oh,
that
They didn't reject the notion.
Irenaeus, he understands the disciples are very, very educated. They're not ignorant.
Where does
Irenaeus says that Jesus chose the disciples because you wouldn't go to a sick man for medication. You go to a doctor for medication. He chose the right people that know what they're talking about to spread his
where
word.
does Irenaeus say that they were not?
I don't know the exact.
Yeah, that's
just like you reference a man for a book.
I brought it
Come on,
up.
man.
I brought it up.
You reference a man for a
the
book.
book up, did I not?
After like 30 minutes in Google. You want me to? I can Google it and pull it up in 5 minutes.
Didn't I bring the book up?
After 30 minutes.
It took me a while, but I brought it up.
I can do
Okay.
it in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Just give me
Okay,
5
let's
minutes.
move on.
I'll have
You
the
got it,
reference. Like what?
Do it.
And that doesn't really change the fact about we're acknowledging the disciples are ignorant. They're
Yeah.
fallible.
I think historically
What
speaking,
happens
that
is
just that's
Pentecost,
not what
the
your
Holy
Christians
Spirit
believe.
comes down. They get filled with the Holy
I
Spirit.
just quoted your name.
Then things change. Now they're
So this is an interesting observation. There are some critical scholars, if we take the MythVision angle. Bart Ehrman, for example, I don't know, I'm just pulling up the first one that I know his picture comes up. He, along with others, have thought that the reason the Gospels portray them as not understanding is because truly they didn't expect this. So when you find Jesus talk about him going to his death and he's going to die, but he's going to rise, all of that's later theology and later Christians putting it in the mouth of Jesus. That's how he interprets it. That's how many of the critical scholars look at it. Because when he dies and they didn't expect this to happen, then cognitive dissonance and rationalization takes over, and they have to then explain, well, why? Hold on. This is all part of God's plan. We're part of this movement that is divine. We need to make sense of this. Lord, what happened? Oh, we found scripture. After he dies, there's a narrative given. Oh, the Holy Spirit has guided us into realizing this was all part of the plan. We didn't know, but he actually was supposed to die. So now they're writing a narrative after the fact to explain why their Messiah, who wasn't supposed to die, died. Then you have other scholars like Richard Carrier. When I asked him if there was a historical Jesus, what do you think happened? And he thinks, when you read like martyrdom tales from Maccabees and other places, that Jesus was kind of death by copying himself. He intentionally went to die. But then you also have to explain, like, why did the disciples not get it? You know? And so like there's different scholarly takes on how to explain this material, but the low-key dumb part is true about Mark. The gospel does portray the disciples as like, just, they don't get it. They're dimwits. Matthew tries to adjust for that. Matthew tries to make them look less dumb. He tries to correct Mark on these problems. But I also look to other literature where a god or a divine figure is among mortals. They don't realize that. That's theoxany. They don't realize they have someone who's divine among them. And they're ignorant the whole time. They're ignorant. They don't realize it. So I'm willing to grant divinity to Jesus. I have no problem with that, even though I know there's a wrestling of this. There's an evolution of thought that scholars point out. I have no problem with it. It doesn't bother me to go either direction with Jesus being divine. It's the later Trinity stuff that I think is that obviously hasn't appeared in this debate. And it seems to be a bit too much to ask for in this debate.
Being led by the Holy Spirit.
So
is
you
the whole teaching.
You would agree that the son of Jonah was before the argument from the son of Jonah, that the same way that Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights.
I didn't realize I had all these super chats. I was sorry about that. Dan, again, thank you, Dan. Muslims have to take it literally because Dhul-Qarnayn built the wall, which will break down, and Jesus, Mahdi, will confront Gog and Magog. It's apocalyptic, yeah. Their whole eschatology falls apart if this story is not true. I think that is problematic. I could see more liberal Muslims who are not fundamentalist in this regard, willing to see legends that are inside their material, but others probably not. And I think you're 100% right. You can go to Josephus too and see that Alexander the Great went to this exact territory and built a wall separating the Scythians from the north from those of the south. He built the iron wall, this impenetrable wall. Josephus talks about this. This is 1st century. So when you're looking at that, and then you look at 700 years later, right? Or 600, 700 years later, I just think it'd be ignorant to not realize this significant player, Alexander the Great, in this story. But you have to trace and see the evolution of the guy. And if like today, we're inheriting things today that I'm certain in hundreds of years from now, people are going to go, well, that's all they knew at the time. That's what they were being passed on, but they missed realizing that it was connected to something back here or something like that. That's what I would see with Alexander the Great. And Dan, again, the Muslim lady is still wearing her COVID N95 mask. I think that's a ninja mask. That's my interpretation. She's ready. She's coming in for Kung Fu karate. She's ready to teach. She's the sensei. That's what I see here. Ivy, thank you so much for the super chat. GL and IP are here in London at the moment, debating Muslims. IP was on live spluttering and whining about our air quality. Made me proud. I don't really keep up that much. What do you do? But yeah, look, I'm glad that there's engagement going on between Muslims and Christians, and I like to pay attention and learn. I think it's a pretty difficult task when Islam does credit the Gospels, but I think they interpret it as no, some lying pens of the scribes wrote these materials. So Christians say in the Islamic dilemma that the Islamic dilemma is that they support or rely upon the Gospels and the scriptures. And there's this debate, like, is it, well, the way that Christians and Jews are saying, or that their books say things, they're lying about that, or is the books themselves corrupt? And I think that's where they try to wiggle out of this dilemma. I think it's a dilemma that you got Jesus born of a virgin in your material too. Like there's all sorts of stuff, but I'm coming from a non-Christian point of view, right? Thank you, Ivy, for that super chat. Someone said converts are dumber. I guess I'm dumb then. I converted before. Let's see. Derek, don't you agree God Logic 1 and Dawa is dishonest? Well, you have a Shroud of Turin image as your profile picture. I don't think anyone's winning this one so far to me. It doesn't seem like anyone's winning this one. I mean, maybe there's some points, right? You could probably say, oh, they got him on that point and they got him on this point. I don't think that, but I think so is apologetics within Christianity. I think if you're going to say something's dishonest, imagining that it's false or it's not accurate, I would say the same thing about Christian apologetics as well. So I'm trying to be consistent here. I'm sure there's worse players in both sides. I'm sure we could talk about, but alleged Fred said we didn't want to say anything there. Yeah, all of them are apologists for sure. I'm not a scholar. I just interview scholars. Okay, I'm going to continue. Let's get a little bit further into this, and then I'm going to wrap things up. Here we go.
So the Son of Man, that's before the resurrection, correct?
Feel free to super chat any questions you have while I'm here, because we're going to wrap things up shortly, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, comments, critiques, whatever. Call me names. I don't care. Thanks a lot. Here we go.
When Jesus gave the sign, is that what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah, he gave that sign.
Okay, is that clear?
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying that, yes. If you're saying just like Jonah was in the belly of the whale,
just like he was in the belly of Leviathan.
So if it is clear, we'd expect the disciples to understand that, right?
What's that?
If it is clear, we'd expect the disciples to understand.
Not necessarily. Okay, for example, let me hold on, Amir, let me ask you this.
Right.
Is it clear from the Quran that you need the Sunnah?
Yes.
Okay. Are there Muslims out there? Maybe you might not consider them Muslim. Are there Muslims that will read that Quran and read the clear Quran and say, you don't need the Sunnah?
I got you. So yeah, there is a minority group. However, we're talking about the disciples in their entirety. So that's the sample size. We have all the disciples in this case. You don't have all the Muslims who read the Quran and come to the conclusion that you don't need the Sunnah. So it will be disanalogous.
No, the principle was about clearness and understanding of people.
Yeah, but if you have everyone missing it, that kind of raises a question.
Wow.
I'll tell you, because you don't have every Muslim who reads the Quran come to the conclusion that, hey, you only read the Quran. But with this example, you have every single disciple missing the mark when it says that the same way that Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so would the Son of Man, right? So that's one point. Secondly, regarding the historicity of that, we're making an argument of historicity, aka it's inductive. We're saying that there's an easier explanation for the data, and an explanation that requires less presupposition.
There's no presupposition.
No.
The text says they didn't understand.
No. I'm saying that the easy explanation that can dismiss your narrative is that it's simply going to be the case that there was a failed Messiah, and they had to reconcile there being a failed Messiah with the text. Simple. So that therefore we'd expect that for that to be passion predictions. So again, all of them missing the mark. That's absurd.
Okay, can I respond to
this? It's kind of repeating what I said before so far. I mean, why would they all not realize that he was supposed to die if it was clearly prophesied and, he was clearly teaching that was what's supposed to happen? So if the scriptures of the Old Testament clearly taught this is what was supposed to happen, Jesus is teaching clearly, hey, this is what's going to happen, and none of them get it the whole time. Yeah, you can see the problem. It seems pretty obvious that's the point of the story. I'm coming at it literarily, but you could see why someone might look at that and go, is this something that someone patches together later? I think that's what he's trying to imply. Correct me in the chat if I'm mistaken on understanding what he's trying to say here.
Yeah, I think that's your presupposition.
Yeah.
Just because 12 people who follow Jesus misunderstand what he's saying, when all through this we see that they're misunderstanding what he's saying, and really quick, and we even see in Acts where it identifies John and Peter as being unlearned. These aren't scholars.
And unlearned means that you don't understand it like
they're not knowledgeable.
science.
They're not.
Well, I thought that Acts quote had to do with them not being literate. I could be wrong, but my understanding isn't just that they don't have knowledge, it's that they aren't literate. Somebody who knows Greek better than me, clearly can correct me on this. Allegedly, Fred, thank you so much. Just kidding, Derek. Appreciate all your work. Can't resist the bad joke. Man, what? So I didn't know what you meant by that. How does one prove which idea is true when all are fiction? Okay, I'm looking for your name. I'm scrolling up above. When you made the comment, we didn't want to say anything, Derek. So I was wondering what you were getting at. I didn't know what the joke was. Sorry about that. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Bad joke. Someone said bad joke. You know, people are gonna have bad jokes. Oh, is this about the her wearing like a ninja outfit or something? What am I? Huh. Nobody better be threatening up in my chat. All right. Allegedly, I'm gonna come back and check on you. I didn't know what it was about. Nobody gets my jokes. Fred, I'm sorry. I don't get it. It must have been prophesied in the scriptures, and you've been saying it all along, but the whole time we were all a bunch of idiots, and we didn't realize that you were saying it. Catch my joke? Did you catch my joke? All right. All right. I hope my joke landed. Let us continue.
The follow.
They're not educated. Hold on, let me finish. I'm building the case here that these aren't scholars that Jesus picked out. They were fishermen. Okay. And so for you to say that, oh, it's unfathomable. It doesn't make any real sense.
He's right. I mean, the Gospels do depict them as fishermen. Let's keep it real.
That the 12 disciples who are not scholarly,
and every Jew
who are not scholarly, who even acknowledge that Jesus is speaking in figurative language, and even when he speaks plainly, they still don't understand him. That these fallible men don't understand Jesus until he resurrects, and then he resurrects, and then it clicks for them, and they were like, "Oh, this is what he meant by that. This is what he's saying. That makes sense." And that's exactly what it says. It says they didn't understand.
So it's almost like when we look at the Quran, right? And then I find material like Dhul-Qarnayn or whatever, and I talk to Muslims all the time. They go, "That's not possible. He didn't know how to read and write, so he couldn't have gathered this information." I think that's kind of a silly cop-out because the Quran itself talks about him, or at least accusations about Muhammad, meeting with people and learning information from people at night that he's learning some of these stories from. I mean, because it makes me go, well, was he also like deaf and blind? You couldn't hear people tell stories? That becomes problematic for me. Let me check the chat just to make it. We are low-key stupid. When you said you might be dumb. We're just having fun, fam. We're having fun. All right, continuing.
They didn't understand. They didn't understand.
That's a hard
over and over again.
It requires more presuppositions. Did any Jew prior to the disciples believe that the Messiah was supposed to be unalive and raised back on the third day?
I'm not. Yes, but hold on. So are you asking for a group?
An individual or a group?
I wouldn't be able to reference a particular
group.
So
all the Jews
and prophets.
All the Jews missed it.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay,
that's why I asked you. Are you talking about a specific?
Right. So now we have a bigger sample size.
God, this is there's a article I have to ideas that are taken seriously by scholars. Richard Carrier. He wrote an article, really good article. I have to pull it up. Here we go. You have to see this because this is an absolute must read if you're a reader. Some controversial ideas that now have a wide scholarly support. The idea that Jesus might not have existed, he talks about that, but the idea that dying and rising gods were already fashionable. I love that kind of stuff. All right, this is the one, right? I think, or is it? No, the idea that some Jews were already expecting a dying Messiah. So if you go read this gets into so much scholarship, lots of academic works, quotes from several different scholars that highlight there was a strand of Jewish thought, and serious scholars who argue this, that a suffering messianic figure would come along. Even in some cases, it seems that they would be divinized or apotheosized. They would be taken to heaven. They would be risen, and you should definitely read this. I've read, like I did my video responding to Wes Huff. I went through some of these books, downloaded some of these books, and went and looked at the quotes myself and saw that there is a growing trend. All of these are scholars, by the way. All of these are scholars that are hinting at this idea. So there's a lot of sources in the Qumran material. Yes, there is evidence that suggests this. That is not Christian, by the way. A lot of it is just Jewish material that teaches this.
We don't only have the 12 disciples, we have every single Jew that read the Torah and the Tanakh not come to the conclusion that only the post-resurrection data points to.
That's not what I said.
I'm making the argument. I'm the one saying that.
But that's not what I'm saying.
That's fine. I'm the one making the argument.
Okay, so for example, if the prophets are saying that the Messiah is going to be crucified and rise again on the third day,
And do you understand that?
this is in there. I would agree. I would say that yes, Jews did understand that the Messiah, like Targum Jonathan, for example. Targum Jonathan says that the suffering servant is the Messiah, and so the Messiah
He doesn't
is
say the suffering servant.
yes, he does.
Not the
Yes,
suffering servant.
the suffering servant in the suffering passages in Isaiah 52 and 53. Targum Jonathan says that that's about the Messiah.
You're misquoting him. Yeah,
No, I'm
he
not.
says that there's a Messiah in Isaiah 53, but he doesn't say the suffering servant is the Messiah. Can you show me anywhere where Targum Jonathan attributes any kind of suffering towards the Messiah?
Okay, so
Because he never attributes suffering to the Messiah.
yes, he does. In Targum Jonathan, at the end, towards the end of Isaiah 52, verses 13 to 15, that same servant who is highly exalted after being marred beyond human resemblance and all that kind of stuff, he applies that to the Messiah. He says this is about the Messiah.
We need to pull this up, probably, right?
Can we get a reference to that?
Targum Jonathan on Isaiah.
So it sounds like this is a stalemate here. And let me see if we can't get Targum Jonathan up here. Let me see. An Aramaic interpretation. Let me see. Targum Jonathan applies Isaiah 53 to the Messiah and attributes, the Christian claim is that he attributes suffering to him. The first half seems to be true. The second is backwards. The Targum identifies the servant as the Messiah at 52:13 and then systematically reassigns the suffering. The marred appearance goes to Israel, 52:14. The sufferings go to the hostile Gentile nations, 53:3 and 7. And he handed over his soul to death, 53:12, is rendered with the idiom Mesar Napsha. He risked his life, not he died. So Bilal was right. I think that's the name of the Muslim guy. The Targum never once attributes suffering to the Messiah. Even Michael Brown, an apologist, concedes the Targum virtually rewrites the passage to remove the Messiah's suffering. And the dating squabble, 2nd century versus 6th century, is moot. In any dating, the Targum postdates Jesus, so it's useless as evidence of a pre-Christian dying and rising Messiah expectation either way. The Muslim guy's right here. So brownie point for the Islamic guys there for that one point. But mind you, you can go through and you can see where the Muslim side might have been wrong, and it goes back and forth. But none of this proves the Trinity. It's just a fun, argument back and forth.
And
You said
52 and 52?
So like the last verse or what? Or what's up?
That's verses 13 and 15.
Okay.
Isn't it 2nd century?
No, it's
It's
6th
retarded.
century.
You asked me about Jews.
Yeah, but that's afterwards though. So
It's 6th century, but
what Amir was asking you is essentially when it comes to this particular thing, right? Is there anybody prior that actually held to this belief to begin with, that they thought that the Christ or Messiah, whatever, is going to die and on the third day resurrect? Okay.
Yeah.
Or after 3 days resurrect.
Yeah, that's like an argument from Silas, right?
It's a good argument.
But
you said
That's the point.
I don't think so, because like, for example, we could point to individuals like Zechariah, for example, Elizabeth and Mary, who identified Jesus as their savior from their sins. And so where are they getting this from? Revelation and the scriptures about the Messiah in Isaiah 53, obviously, and other passages where the Messiah saves them from their sins through sacrifice. So
nothing here says that in Targum Jonathan. I don't know.
yes, it does.
I have it right here in front
Try
of
to
me.
read it out, please.
It's referring to the house of Israel. It's not referring to a single person.
No. Please go to Targum Jonathan
Right, we're on it.
specifically.
I have it. I'm reading verse 13, verse 14, verse.
Give us
Can
specific
you read
verse.
it out, please?
Yeah. Starting from what? Verse 13?
Are you? Is it in Isaiah 52?
Yeah, is as if it's right.
Yeah, Isaiah 52.
Do you have a specific verse?
Verses 13 and 15.
Yeah. So when it says, just as many were appalled at him and so marred was his appearance, let's see what he has to say. As the house of Israel.
But
It's in reference to a group of
but hold
people
on.
in
Who does
Targum
he
Jonathan.
no? Who does he refer to as the Messiah, the servant?
But that doesn't mean that this verse, when it's referring to who is marred,
He said,
is
"As the house of Israel."
but no, he's saying the house of Israel is
No.
being marred.
Please read it, brother.
As the house of
Brother,
Israel.
read verses 13 and down.
Right.
Period too.
Yeah. Please
Not
read
saying
13.
As the house of Israel anxiously hope for him many days, which are not upon the more their appearance and their brightness. Their appearance and their
Can
brightness.
you read verses 13 to 14?
What is their appearance and their?
Who does he say the servant is?
He says their appearance and their. So it's referring to a plural group of people, not one. So it's their appearance
think you-
being
I don't
marred,
think you
not
understand what
his
I'm asking
appearance
you.
being marred.
in
No, I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
in verse 13.
Hold on, but you don't understand what I'm saying.
Hold on.
When it says that their appearance was
Aaron,
marred, who's
slow
the there?
down.
I get
In
it.
verse 13, who does he say it's about?
Yeah, he says the servant is the Messiah, but he says,
Thank you.
but he
What
says-
are we doing?
I've already
By the way, this is one of the highlights from the beginning of the video. I didn't realize that. Behold, my servant Messiah shall prosper. He shall be high and increase and be exceedingly strong. So, but it still described Israel as far as the marring, and even having Michael Brown think this is not talking about, he concedes the Targum virtually rewrites the passage to remove the Messiah's suffering. So it's dealing the Targum never once attributes suffering to the Messiah. So that was the dispute. He's not saying, the Muslim guy's not saying that the Messiah doesn't pop up in the context. He's saying the suffering doesn't apply to the Messiah. It's talking about Israel. Even Michael Brown agrees with this. And, you know, I've had Rabbi Tovia Singer on the channel several times, and I've reached out to many Christian apologists, Michael Winger back in the day, all that, Mike Winger, to get them to debate Rabbi Tovia Singer. And every time I've reached out, they've responded, have him debate Michael Brown. Like, they do not want to touch Rabbi Tovia Singer. They only want Michael Brown to debate the Jewish guy. And Michael Brown seems to know, I would imagine, the Targum better than the Christian side on this. Keep it real. Keep it real. So I do think in this case, God Logic was mistaken on the pedantic details of what was going on here. Okay.
Hey, from the very beginning, I said that Targum Jonathan does take Isaiah 53 to be about a Messiah, but he never once attributes any suffering towards the Messiah. If you allow me to
Who
finish.
is the servant?
Because just suffering is always attributed to the house of Israel, in which Targum Jonathan either has the Messiah praying for them or advocating and intercessing for them, but he's never once partaking in the suffering. And scholarship also
he is there in
acknowledges
Jonathan.
this.
Right
And no, it's the house of
We
Israel.
literally
being
said,
talking.
as the house of
That's
Israel.
why it says their faces, not his face.
He identified.
Why did I say their face?
He identified because one. There's,
I didn't know the Messiah is
there's
a
two
they
things.
them.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't know that, but
Oh, so the Messiah is a they them.
So
Okay.
according to the scripture, actually,
Wow.
you have the Messiah being identified as Israel. Did you know that?
So he's a they them?
Did you know that?
No, I'm just asking. Is it they them?
So did you know that the Messiah is Israel?
By the way, I agree. That would have been an interesting one. Michael Heiser versus Singer would have been good. I think so. They'd have had some interesting things. I think Heiser would have had some good punches. You know, they could go back and forth with their thing. I agree. Too bad he's not alive. I enjoyed listening to Heiser. He was fun.
Thank you. So with the Messiah being identified as Israel is
So he is a
itself.
they them.
Hold on, let me finish. With Israel, well, Allah's a they them. Allah's a he they.
Nice two
What are you talking about?
Nice two
Allah's a he they, right?
You don't believe in our like
Good jump.
Is
Good
Allah a
jump.
he they?
Good jump.
Did he say is he a we he?
Good jump.
Yeah, let's not play this game, bro.
What is happening with these people? What is going on? Oh, snap. It's getting hot. Look, Michael's cheesing over there. Michael's over here. Look, this guy's cheesing over here on the right, too. That's funny. Oh, snap. It's getting hot. And this guy in the middle is like, yo, what's about to happen? They better fight.
Messiah is a they them.
All right, and Allah's a he they.
Good job.
Fine.
Yeah, I wanted to bring you back to the other.
And allegedly he might be a he she.
All right, cool. Can we talk about the other point now?
Sure.
So when it comes to what he was saying, as we were saying before, you guys were trying to read the verse. What he's saying is that you guys just claimed that this is something which was clear in the scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, correct? Okay. If it was clear, we would expect that there's going to be at least an individual, a group of people,
Zechariah.
even if it's small.
Okay,
Okay,
but
that says that's based off of your understanding or your presupposition regarding what the text is saying.
Zechariah.
Yeah, thank you for proving my point.
Yeah,
So, like, he keeps quoting scripture, right? Old Testament prophets and whatnot, probably based off New Testament references to it, but notice none of the disciples or anyone around in the story seems to be aware of, except for Jesus, that this is supposed to happen, that it's really there in the scripture. They don't seem to realize it, though.
Closing.
How much possibility? He actually give you an example in the video.
answer.
Zechariah early says
Let me give you the answer. No, I'm saying Zechariah insofar as a Messiah dying and resurrecting after 3 days for the sake of your sins.
Oh, so this is what I understand now.
Yeah,
What you guys are asking for is, where does an individual in our text verbatim say, hey, the Messiah is going to suffer and in 3
I didn't
days
say in the
rise
text.
again?
I'm not saying in the text.
Who read the text and came to that conclusion?
Zechariah.
Oh my God.
Dude, the Zechariah is the text.
No, Zechariah is not the text, bro.
He's a character from the New Testament. Two
I-
Zechariahs.
I understand. But we're talking about historical precedents of the interpretation.
Zechariah.
On my days. Before the disciples, bro.
Zechariah. this Zechariah was there when Jesus was a baby.
Do you know who Zechariah is?
Yes, it's in the New Testament, right?
John the Baptist. Yes.
Which gospel is it in?
Luke.
Right.
Exactly.
So Luke is
Historical
still,
account.
again, Luke's writing is still post the resurrection.
Then we need
So what?
finish.
Let me finish.
So yeah, this you can see the tug of war happening, because the Muslim side is not granting the gospel material the way that the Christian side is buying the story as it's said, as if it's really history. That Zechariah, the father, I believe Zechariah is the father of John the Baptist, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check that. Zechariah, he's the priest. Priest in Luke is John the Baptist's father. And then that would connect him to like priesthood stuff. So yeah, he appears in Luke 1. The priest struck, I believe that he's mute. And then there's like this miracle, and he finally goes to speak one day and all that. Like all of that story sounds just like a story. Someone is writing and crafting a story. You can see why there's tension in terms of they're not agreeing on how to even read the material. I don't know if the Muslim side would read their own material the way that, I would approach it. Like, would this tension occur if we were talking about the Quran? How would they evaluate that? How would they look at the Quran? Like, how would the critical thinking skills that they're bringing to evaluating the Gospels fall to the wayside when you start approaching the Quran the way that they're approaching the New Testament? I wonder.
Let me finish.
Using these gospels against saying we can't use
Let me
them.
finish. If it's post resurrection, then the argument still fails. Then you could have just went to the disciples.
Oh, wait. So because
let me finish.
because the
Let me
writing is
finish.
post resurrection, that means the argument it don't work because it's after resurrection.
Okay, let me So because it's still post resurrection.
Bye bye history.
Let me finish. No, it's qualified.
Bye bye Islam. That's post resurrection.
It's qualified history.
The Quran is post resurrection.
Thank you for that, Holmes. I'm going to respond now.
That's not
So again,
now.
so let me finish. Again, you went to a point that's about someone after the resurrection account, which the critique already grants. The critique that I'm given already allows for things after the resurrection of claims of the Messiah being unalive. It already accounts for that. You could have just went to the disciples.
No, what you just did. You just went nuclear.
Let me finish. You could have just went to the disciples. That would have been the same critique, right? But that's the very thing in question. Who, before the supposed resurrection, interpreted as you did? Nobody.
Notice what you did. You just went nuclear. Now we can know nothing about the historical Jesus because all our texts are post-resurrection. So throw out Mark, throw out hypothesized Q, throw out John, the text you've been using here, throw out everything now. So you just destroyed your whole argument. You can't know anything about the historical Jesus.
Beautiful. So I don't think you want to attack my critique specifically. My critique,
That's what we've been doing the whole time.
my critique is that the hypothesis that the Christ predicted his resurrection and crucifixion, and the hypothesis that this would have been explained away and reconciled.
What is the motivation behind this? Is it because the Quran seems to imply, or at least their interpretation of it, that there was no crucifixion? Therefore, we don't need to. What is driving the Muslims in terms of their view against this? Did Jesus not die in their view? Was he? What's driving it? I don't know. I'm curious.
By the Jews in order to better explain away the data. I'm saying that my explanation requires less presupposition. It's a very simple critique. Now, when you go and say, well, will Zechariah believe this? Or Luke, Mark, Matthew, Luke believe this? This is still post-resurrection and the critique still fails. That doesn't mean that now I become an epistemic analyst regarding history. It means that
Q would be post-resurrection. Everything, including if there were a Q, would be after the resurrection. So I don't know why. I'm curious the motivation. And Guitar Dog says, I actually agree with IP here. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're trying to build your case, like it'd have been better to go, well, what is historical in the Gospels that you think is historical and why? Put the pressure on the Muslim side to tell me what from the Gospels you think is historical and why do you think it's historical? Because it seems like all of the weight is only on the Christian side here. And it's an endless back and forth when you don't know what your opponent seems to think is historical, right? So we would want to know what these three think is historical and why do you think it's historical? And if they bring in the Quran or the, Hadith to justify that, I'd be like, okay, you heard that, everybody. Now let's continue. But let's see.
It's qualified. So again, if it is the case that it is clear in the Old and New Testament, right, that this is supposed to happen, the crucifixion is supposed to happen, the resurrection is supposed to happen, according to Luke 24:46, it said that the scriptures say the Messiah is supposed to be unalived and raised back on the third day. How come we don't have any historical precedence of this? So it's expected.
So we can't use any sources post-date the resurrection because they could just get it from the disciples after the fact.
Right.
Great. Can't know anything about historical Jesus.
No, no,
They got
no
that-
response.
Hold up.
Wonderful.
They got that from the disciples. So everything you use to argue for the historical Jesus is coming from the disciples post-resurrection. So you're just cherry picking.
By the way, your
If it al-
argument is the Quran says so.
Yeah. It aligns with Islam. It's good to go. If it doesn't align with Islam, it must be wrong.
Where else do you get any claims about Jesus? We're not talking about.
That's different because we have not only historical justification, we have metaphysical justification because we can prove the Quran to be true. It's independent.
Oh my gosh. They could prove the Quran to be true. What? What's happening?
Okay, so
Thank you, Avery.
Here we go. The
Thank
Quran's
you.
from God because
So again, this is like a whole shift around the Quran. If you want to know why I believe the Quran to be true, we can have a discussion about that.
It's post-resurrection.
Real quick.
It's post-resurrection.
If you can show that the Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John are metaphysically true, sure, you can try and do that.
If you can show that Mark, Matthew, and Luke are metaphysically true, where's my philosophers in the chat right now, ladies and gentlemen? Like, where are all the philosophers at in here? Holy smokes. I don't know how you could prove any of that is metaphysically true. That's a wild claim. Okay. That was kind of embarrassing. I could see why that would look pretty rough.
I'm pretty sure you're going to fail.
Yeah.
But if you can't demonstrate that there's going to be a symmetry break between how we believe the Quran to be true and why we believe the Bible to be false.
Yeah,
Very simple.
So your argument is the Quran is true. Therefore, anything we see in the Gospels that agrees with the Quran is therefore true.
No.
If it doesn't, we reject it. So this is
nothing to
circular.
do with
I agree.
This is circular.
Can I respond?
I actually do think that Michael Jones is right here, though. I do think that this is ultimately it's and this is not to dig at a human. Humans are humans, right? But like these, I guarantee you, are foundational principles that drive the thought process. Tell me your thoughts in the chat. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Does everybody agree? Allegedly, Fred, metaphysics is a meaningless term anyway. Look, I do think that this was pretty rough. Who's trying to call me right now? Sorry, I got a call coming in. All right. Yeah, I'm going to keep going. Someone said exactly. All right, I'm going to keep rocking here. Look, listening to people talk and argue religion is absolutely hilarious. That's why I'm having fun today, just playing. Look, I'm hoping you're having fun as well. All right, let's see how this goes.
You should be able to get these terms I'm going to use now. So there's a difference between, for example, historical certainty and metaphysical certainty. You would agree that metaphysical certainty grants us and yields higher probability, higher levels of certainty than merely historical certainty. You would agree with that.
Do you have historical certainty on Jesus?
There's a lot going on just now there.
Let me finish.
Jesus.
Thank you so much. So if we can, what we're going off, the data we're going off is the historical certainty regarding
Yes,
the
that's the topic.
Let me finish. Regarding the crucifixion and the resurrection, right? Is that let me finish, bro. Control yourself. If we can show that this can be historically
Control yourself.
undermined, it has nothing to do with the Quran, because when it comes to the Quran, we can have metaphysical certainty. We can prove Muhammad to be a true prophet of God, and therefore the claims are going to be true. They're going to correspond to reality. There's a clear symmetry break. If you can show me that Mark, Matthew, and Luke are metaphysically true and certain, then fine. Then this argument is done.
So
but
now-
you can't do that.
So now, wake up, man. I know you went to sleep. I know now it's about metaphysical reality, a metaphysical truth.
Go ahead, bro.
Well, okay, we're talking about historical. Is the Quran to give you historical certainty on the life of Jesus?
Yeah, the Quran is a historical document about Jesus.
Okay, so you can't use the Quran. So you can't use the Quran to get historical information from Jesus, true historical information,
No,
as a ground.
You get the details about Jesus because we attain metaphysical certainty.
From what is your historical source that you use for it?
No,
because you just said it's not.
Let me clarify my position. We don't believe. This is very clear. We do not believe that the Quran is a historical document about Jesus. That's insane.
Does it make historical claims about Jesus?
Wait. It makes claims, and the way that we verify these claims is because we can ascertain metaphysical certainty.
Okay, I got you.
Jeez. Did we not just leave? Like, they were doing great. They were doing great until that became the grounding, the basis for this this view. Wow. Pretty wild.
Because you believe it's from God.
No,
but that's not my.
So you don't do it historically.
Yes, you don't.
Wait, hold on.
There's no historical.
Did we ever say? Real quick. Did we ever say? Let me show the difference now. Did we ever say that the Quran is historical to Jesus? Did we ever say that?
But can
No.
it be?
Are the Gospels historical to Jesus?
Wait, can it be?
If no,
Does the Quran make historical claims? Wait, does it make historical claims on Jesus? Yes or no?
I got you. The Quran makes claims about Jesus. Let me finish up. And the reason that we can attain certainty.
My question was simple. I just asked if it makes historical claims on Jesus.
I'm about to answer you, bro. So it's very simple. The Quran makes claims about Jesus.
Historical?
Let me finish, bro. Same thing with Abraham, Moses, Noah, Jacob. If you mean by historical, that the Quran claims that it's contemporary to Jesus, then no.
I didn't ask that.
That's not what I asked.
I'm qualified.
History
Let me finish.
to be contemporary to the person.
Just let me finish. But if you mean by historical, that it makes claims about a person who's called Jesus, then yes, it does do that.
How do you corroborate those claims historically?
Let me finish up. Again, I never claimed that the Quran gives us historical certainty regarding these texts. What I said is that it gives us metaphysical certainty.
So hold on, bro.
You gotta let me land. No.
You keep going on. No. You gotta let us engage in and interact with what you're saying.
I'm answering. I can finish the objection. You can respond.
Please, like in 30 seconds now.
Let me show you the difference between what I'm saying and what they're saying. You guys are claiming that the resurrection, the crucifixion, they are historical to Christ. The passion predictions, they're historical to Christ. Not merely that they're going to be something that can be proven metaphysically to be true, right? The difference is, I am not claiming that. As a Muslim, I'm not claiming that the Quran is historical to Jesus. What I'm saying is that its claims regarding things that we don't have epistemic access to can be verified metaphysically because we have independent reasons to believe Islam is true. It's very simple.
All right, pause there. Thank you.
Well,
so, can the claims that the Quran makes about Jesus, the historical Jesus, can they be historically verified? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So that's very good. So what we got?
Go ahead, finish up. Yeah.
So no, that's what we. Thank you. So got it.
That's my position. Go ahead.
Relax, guys. Relax. We're just talking.
Did we forget the topic? We forgot
We're
the topic
just
now. Keep
chilling.
the topic long.
We just have to build a little bit of touchy. That's all. So where we are now,
Go.
because I just wanted to make sure
What's
we
the
all.
topic though?
It's Haji.
Hey man, what's the topic?
It's my Habibti. It's my.
Nah,
Please.
your
It's my.
Watch yourself. Your habibti's over there.
Is that right?
Dude, they're talking crap.
Go ahead, bro.
Okay, look. So where we're at, what we just established is that you as Muslims, using your paradigm with the Quran, have no historical basis on the life of Jesus. The historical claims that the Quran makes cannot be historically verified, and so therefore the Quran is out of the equation.
Beautiful.
Hold on. Is that I didn't mean that disrespectfully.
No, you're good.
Okay, so it's just out of the equation. I put to the side because it cannot be historically verified. Yet it makes historical claims on Jesus.
Beautiful.
So now where we're at is that you're using our book that gives you historical claims and historical corroboration on the life of Jesus. And so when your Quran makes claims that's opposite to the historical source, Guess who's wrong?
Beautiful.
Your Quran.
Beautiful.
So what we see
Respond.
from the historical
Yep.
sources, Jesus was crucified. From the historical sources, Jesus was resurrected. From the historical sources, Jesus teaches that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are one in essence and one God.
That's the argument against that.
Exactly.
Real
But
quick.
the historical sources teach that.
Let me address that. So real quick, notice, for example, with Christians, Avery, IP, what they believe.
Oh gosh, there's so much there to unpack. Now it's at first they kind of allowed each other to go back and forth and to communicate. I was actually going to have IP try to jump on here. He might be busy. I randomly just texted him and was like, dude, jump on because I'm going to wrap this live stream up soon. I wanted to get his thoughts about what happened. Me and him don't have to agree, but I still would want to hear his thoughts on this after the fact, right? If I had God Logics Connect, I'd hit him up too and just say, dude, jump on here real quick. Let's chat. Yeah, that got the whole metaphysics thing threw me for a loop. I do agree. Like, I think the Quran is dependent upon earlier Christian material. If that earlier Christian material is corrupt based on their own religious standard, not just a historical, arguments, but like their own religious standard, we got a problem. We got a problem. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts. You tell me what you think about that at the end. I'm not going on and on. I'm not going to keep going. I think at the end, the girl says something like, I think she says something at the end like, you tried to even prove Jesus was divine. You couldn't do that, but you definitely didn't argue that the Trinity was true. I think the argument of did Jesus teach the Trinity was probably not a great topic, personally. Should have just been like, is Jesus divine or something like that. But then again, I don't know all that went on into the back end of setting this debate up. All right, everybody in the chat, comments, questions, anything? Someone said, I never argue with Muslims because I don't want to die so soon. I've had a lot of people write me like, dude, you need to be careful. You need to worry. And I'm like, what? I'm not worried like that. I don't know. I mean, I have Muslim friends, like, so I don't know. I don't know. There are some crazies out there. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have any fear like that. The Quran is a cheap ripoff of the book of God, a complete heresy. Dark Child says, was the topic ever actually discussed? Fred, I think they tried to get to it and they never could get to it because they were so caught up on other things. It's hard to do that. Sometimes debates do take, they derail. Do you think these kinds of debates are fruitful at all? I think they're entertainment, to be honest with you. That's my personal opinion. I think these are more entertainment than, I mean, they might be somehow have usefulness and getting people to see like why people debate what they do and how people are headstrong going into things like that from a psychological end. But as far as like getting to the truth, you got to go look at the sources. You have to read the books. You have to go look at the primary sources yourself, read the academics, reason through this material yourself. If you went into this like a football game and your team is already team Islam or team Christian, you're going to root and bat usually for your team. That's not to say you can't see, oh, well, the other side did get you on that one point. You're still team what you are when you leave the debate usually. So it's hard to see, I think it's more of an entertainment thing. That's my opinion. How come Christians and Muslims debate about the Jews' Bible? That's a whole nother. This is interesting. Good question, I would say. Clearly, because Christianity stems out of Judaism. But yeah, proving Jesus was divine when we don't even have evidence he existed outside the biblical text. Well, according to the text, Kinetic, give us some type of, according to the text. Bravo in the house. Thank you so much. In Paul's letters, he mentions all of the church leaders and where they're from. We know Pete as apostle of Rome, yet he's unnamed by Paul. Why? Good question. I'm not sure Paul and Peter were seeing things eye to eye. You have letters that are written later in the name of Peter that are claiming him and Paul are buddy-buddy and they get along and they're good friends. But Paul himself is the only time he mentions him is my awareness is Galatians, and it's confronting him, Cephas, to his face. And, he visited him once, but then he came back and he wasn't eating with the Gentiles, or he walks away because, Jews were approaching and he calls them out as a hypocrite. So I'm not really sure. I think there was some tension. There's some scholars who've highlighted there was a break in the early church between Paul and the rest of the Jerusalem apostles. That might be why. When you become enemies of people, you might not want to name drop them. You might be, he might have to name drop them in 1 Corinthians 15. Is that original content? Some people think that's interpolated. I don't necessarily know what the answer to this is. All of these are arguments that are put up, but he doesn't seem to be best pals with him. So maybe that plays a role. I don't know. What empires do we have today? Name them. What are you talking about referring to? Like the Roman Empire or something? Are you talking about literally, or are you talking to somebody in the chat? The actual couple made a movie together, and that is cool. Metaphysical Ninja. Agree, Derek. I don't think they ever got to it. Yeah, probably not. The debate gets so tense and in the weeds. Yeah, if there was a guy, he sure wasn't the guy in the book, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I agree. Entertainted. Michael, come on, please. Yeah, I would like, well, let me see if he texts me back. I just want his post-resurrection assessment, because truth is, when it got to that, hold on. I got to send him a link. Bear with me. We got to get Jones here. He's going to be in person. We're going to be recording soon. Shoot, how do I send it to him here? Let me do this. Send it to my wife's messenger and then text it to him. Sending now, bro. All right. This will be interesting having him on. Okay. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with me. Hit the like button. I want to get his assessment after the fact. This will be cool. There we go. I have to send it to my wife and then find it on Messenger and then send it to him through text on the phone. So there we have it. All right. Cool. Anyway, that was pretty wild. Is it possible to make intelligent comments based on fantasies of fools? Who won according to you? I mean, look, it depends on the thing. I don't think it's an overall winning. I think there might be some brown. We got Jones in the house. What's up, brother?
What you want?
Hold on. Let me get my headphones here. Okay, there you go. Okay, so look, man, I'm over here doing a live stream. You know those things we do. Oh, there you are. Holy crap! I didn't even see you were in the chat, man.
I mean, you weren't even paying attention. You're all like, "What's taking him so long?" And you're staring off in the la la land. What do you want?
I'm just rambling on. Okay, check this out. So obviously, I went through and I'm picking apart. I feel like it never really got to the place you wanted to. That happens in debates when you have three cooks in both, or three chefs on both ends. You guys didn't really get to the conclusion of the Trinity. But,
right. And that's the problem. We were like, we need to know who the historical Jesus is. And they started the debate by saying, we're going to use your sources, the gospel. So, okay, that means everything in the gospels is good to go. And then then they started changing it. And it's like, man, you got to figure this out. It's like,
yeah. By the way, do you have a microphone, or is that built into your laptop or something?
Hang on. Make sure this is connected to the right. Okay. Let me get the right mic on here, because it's going into the wrong mic.
That's what I wanted to know, because
is that better?
Way better. Yeah. I knew something was off. Okay, I want to ask you, because I think it's important people understand. People don't have to agree, on everything. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm coming at this from the outside, and I'm seeing some points. I can see points you guys won. I can see points where they were probably right on certain details. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, that whole point, I'm glad you guys started off, if we are would you agree with me? I made this statement earlier in my review. Would you agree with me that if we are going to try and find anything about the historical Jesus, we're forced to have to deal with the canonical material that we're finding in the New Testament? You might could look outside of that and find little keys that might be hints at some of the other material that might tell us something. But overall, if that doesn't work, it's a lost cause. Wouldn't you agree with me on that?
Of course.
Okay. So what, in retrospect of the debate, what is your analysis looking at what they were doing? Because it seems like at some point they got to the metaphysical Quran truth, and that is really probably what's driving the whole thing, because the Quran seems to hint at he was never crucified. Do you think that's what's driving the whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so there is an underlying premise when you're debating Muslims on an issue like this. It's that anything that agrees with Islam and the Quran, that's the historical Jesus. Anything that disagrees is made up later. And they actually admitted this in the debate to some degree, where they're like, yeah, the Quran's not an historical document. It can't tell you about the historical Jesus, which they admitted. So like they said, we just take that as a metaphysically true, and then therefore anything it says is true. So case in point, anything that agrees with the Quran is therefore the historical Jesus, which is absurd considering they also opened the debate by saying, yeah, we got to go to the canonical gospels. We got to go to your sources. Great. Jesus says a lot in these gospels that you're not going to like. So why are you conceding that? And then of course they flip-flop throughout the debate.
Yeah, that was interesting to see, because I thought at first, I'm like, maybe they're approaching this through a critical scholarly lens, and that was their goal, right? And that's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, okay, but then, you know, you get to stuff like the virgin birth. And if there's anything critical scholars would see as legendary, right? And I'm talking critical scholars, they'd be like, well, we're going to say that's fictive. You do this for noble people, important figures, whatever. That would be the first to go. So they're like granting too much, it seems, and they're forced to deal with a conundrum here. I just don't get, like, be consistent, it seems. That's what I'm thinking. But,
well, that's what I was trying to show. And maybe I didn't articulate my point right away at first, but I was able to hash it out in my conclusion. When they start appealing to Q, okay, you and I both know there are several different ideas about Q. There's several different reconstructions. Okay, what do we do with this then? For example, like some will say that some will say that Jesus said this in Q. Some will say he said that in Q. Some will say you can only go with this stuff. It's so confusing. So what I was trying to show was that, okay, you agreed the canonical gospels are the sources we go to, but scholars will often assign the saying, I send you prophets and wise men and you will kill them and persecute them, to Q. Okay, fine. But Jesus also said that about himself in Matthew, I believe it's 23 or something. So if that's the case, that's a claim of divinity according to your own paradigm, but they wouldn't accept that. So this is what I was trying to point out to them. And so we kept saying, listen, if the sayings of Q are on the table, what do we see in this? We see several sayings that the Jesus of the synoptic applies to himself as well. Therefore, you're in a problem as well if you're going to say that is authoritative. But see, they were doing weird stuff. They're saying Thomas is authoritative, except when it doesning agree with them. They're saying Q sayings are authoritative. Well, the Q they want, not the Q not the Q that anything in Q they don't like, they're going to throw out. So it was complete mess, and that's why we never got to a conclusion in the debate, because we couldn't get them to agree on sources on who the historical Jesus was.
You know what I wish you guys did? Because I'm watching, and after a while, you know, sometimes I'm like, they had good points. I think the Targum, for example, they brought up, I agreed with their statement on that. I think that was just one that you could argue, hey, yeah, the Messiah is different from the Israel that suffers in this Targum, which, by the way, is completely irrelevant to the overall thesis that you're arguing. But here's what I wish you guys did, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I wish it wasn't possible. 3 chiefs, not enough Indians, like you're fighting, okay? And I really wish you would have went, okay, pause, guys. What do you think in the Gospels we have is historical? Just tell us. We'll shut up and let you go for 5 minutes. Tell me what is historical inside our Gospels.
I tried to do that. There's one point where I definitely try to do that. I'm like, hey, what exactly. So like, there's like halfway through the debate, I go, okay, back to the beginning. What are the historical sources on Jesus that we can use? And of course, we didn't get a straight answer. So yeah, that'd be another way to articulate it. But man, it was hard to get them to nail down to anything, and they just went nuclear. They just, well, we can't know anything about historical Jesus because your sources say things we don't like, so we're going to reject them.
That's what it felt like. And I went into this review being completely neutral, being completely fair of my honest thoughts. And I honestly don't care. At the end of the day, like if the text at the end of the day said he is the Trinity, I don't feel ontologically attached to it. You see what I'm saying? So I don't feel like I need to, if it said the Trinity was true, cool, I'd believe it. However, while they're doing this argument, I am persuaded as a non-believer that there is a divinity being portrayed. And I think if you look at, just scratch the Christian stuff for a second, in Jewish material, you do see two powers in heaven. You know about this material, Metatron and Enochic literature. Like you can see figures, Sophia, angel of the Lord ideas. There's a lot of stuff that seems to have multiple aspects of divinity in heaven. And it's not just this one absolute hyper monotheistic oneness in terms of person, nature, etc. And I do think that there is nuance to that. So I want to say that on the record. While I don't think that we wouldn't agree on the whole full-blown Trinitarian formula, I do see divinity formula happening there, and I could see all of the ingredients for why Christians would put together something like this, and with the growing philosophical schools and stuff like that. But look, I got you here, man. You came in, you didn't have to. I really appreciate it. So what else would you like to get off your chest while you can about this debate?
Nothing. They didn't listen, if you're going to say, make the claim the historical Jesus did not teach the Trinity, and then our first thing we're going to say is, what are the sources on the historical Jesus? And then you're going to flip-flop throughout the debate and not give us a straight answer. Debate over. You did not make your case that you can show us who the historical Jesus is, and he did not teach the Trinity. Like, because the way they worded the prompt put them in the positive claim because they weren't thinking right. So they didn't actually win. And most people, if you go to the comments, are saying like this was bad for them. So I mean, like, yeah, it's they're running these clips online. Like they're saying I lied about John Kloppenberg, and they just didn't understand the point I was making. Maybe I didn't articulate it properly. That's why I brought back to my conclusion. This is the point I'm trying to make that you're not getting. So, but then also they're running clips on going, the Muslims are sharing clips about us admitting the disciples were low-key stupid. Now, I don't know about you, Derek, but when you read the New Testament, the Gospels, do you think the disciples are set up as like the beacons of wisdom?
Absolutely not. No, but I said that in this review. The whole point, now I approach it from a literary standpoint, but if you take it as historical, they clearly aren't getting it. And God Logic was right. I don't know if Irenaeus really said they were educated. He's just wrong. Sorry. Some of the fathers are going to say things that are just based on the material we have. They were fishermen, and they weren't highly educated figures. There is a scholarly. Oh, go ahead.
You could say, like, for example, Matthew was a tax collector, so he had some education. But then, I mean, that's like the only one. So it's like maybe there's a couple others, but I mean, yeah.
But even that education wouldn't be like it doesn't demand to count and write names and things like that to be like upper echelon, like educated.
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah, you have some, but not that much. Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
yeah. But even then, I think that the point. I read the Gospels through literary lens. That includes the theological angle. So when you're reading this material, imagine the evangelist wants you to understand that there's an ignorance before the Spirit ends up inside of these people. So the idea is you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. So even if I'm reading this from a more fictive historical approach or historical fiction, however you want to paint it, I'm thinking to myself, the author is intending you to understand that they don't get it. They won't get it until the pneuma comes in and of course helps enlighten them and help them understand. That is what I see in the literary aspect. Bart Ehrman thinks that this is a kind of a post hoc rationalizing of why the Messiah died when they didn't expect it. But even that doesn't go as far as the Muslims were trying to take it in this debate with you. They weren't willing to see. They were trying to say that after the fact, they were putting these pieces together, but they weren't making that case that Bart Ehrman was making. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Well, just to quickly note on that, one of my next video I'm going to have uploaded, which will probably be in a week from now, will be on. I'm going to offer evidence that Jesus did predict his death and resurrection, and I am going to address the disciple issue. Like, why didn't they get this kind of thing? I actually think that might be a marker of authenticity, but I'll wait for that. But here's the thing you got to understand about the Muslim mentality. They think this is a massive win for them. And Christians, atheists, non-Muslims are all looking at them going, what are you talking about? The Christians are just believing what the Bible says. We would expect that. But to them, in Islam, they assume the Sahaba, so that's the first generation of Muslims, are basically on the level of infallible or close to that. Like they're perfect. So any way you sort of attack them is a huge insult. So they have a completely different outlook. So they think this is a massive win for them in their community because Christians admitted the disciples were fallible, ignorant about Jesus predicting his death and resurrection. But that's the echo chamber. They don't realize how dumb this looks to the outside because the majority of people will just be like, but that's what the Bible is presenting. It's presenting the disciples as foolish, as ignorant, as fallible. Like Peter denies Jesus 3 times. That was dumb.
Like
no
don't write that if you don't want it in there, you know?
Right. As you mentioned, that's like the criterion of embarrassment. They're going to they're just meeting things about themselves which meet that criterion. Therefore, that actually helps, we would say, actually helps our case. And even some critical scholars would say, yeah, like Gerd Ludemann, for example, he's an atheist. He says, no later Christian would make up the idea that Jesus denied, or that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Like that has to have some authenticity there. So like, if they're not getting the whole death and resurrection thing, that's odd for them to admit that in an honor shame culture. But to the Muslims in their paradigm, they got the weird hadith science that doesn't make sense. Where part of hadith science is they assume the first generation of Muslims, the Sahaba, were all like beyond this idea they could lie. Like they're never going to pass on false information. And you and I know, you start with that assumption, you're just going to get this idea that Islam is true because it's a ridiculous assumption. Like we have to assume these guys are fallible and be kind of agnostic when we look at this data. And so that we can try in our best to follow the evidence where it leads. But so that's why they think this is a massive win. And every Christian is just looking at them like, this is the worst dawah I've ever seen because you're just admitting you don't know what the Bible says if you think this is a victory for you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can think of reasons why someone, just getting into the example about Peter, I could think of reasons why someone could invent a story or create a story about it. And even then still think there was a memory of people who doubted. So maybe this is a story that is characterizing early Christians who might have had doubts. I don't know. I'm just throwing it up there. Gerd Ludemann has his view. I'm sure there's others who have theirs. But your point about that is a gotcha or a win by saying the disciples seem to be dimwits and they don't get it. I don't understand how that lands the way they think it lands. I'm not sure what they're using it for. Or is this just saying you guys trust material that comes from people you're calling stupid? Is that what they're saying?
That's what they're saying, yes.
Okay. I mean, I do think that if you were going to approach this historically and say, well, look, this is a problem, an embarrassment, and they're still putting it in there, you would then grant there's some honesty involved in that, wouldn't you? If they're going to say that. So if everything is too cookie cutter perfect, that would be raising more red flags than it not being there. So I don't know.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Well, think of the Gospel of Peter. Like, everyone's there when he gets out. Like, they want to make sure everybody knows. Like that, we know that's like obviously a late invention, but that's the kind of stuff they would expect, or that's what they would kind of want here. So the fact that they admit, like Peter, in the tradition is the sermons that end up in Mark, or the sayings that end up in Mark. He's admitting this stuff. That's a sign of authenticity that he's willing to admit this because it meets the criterion of embarrassment.
Yeah, it'd be better than what they're seemingly trying to paint this as. Ivy Ann, I think, lives where you're at right now, or roughly in the area. They said earlier in the live stream you were there debating Muslims. Are you?
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing right now?
Yeah, I'm here. I was at Speaker's Corner yesterday debating Muslims. Then we went back and had some debates with some Muslims we had scheduled. So that I'm going to upload that Friday, the debate I had with a Muslim. And tomorrow I'm going to go up to Oxford to debate a really well-known atheist. I don't know if I can say who it is. Well-known atheist. It's not Alex O'Connor. It's probably the second most famous YouTube atheist for Justin Brierley. And so that should come out soon. So yeah, so doing a bunch of stuff here. It's fun.
That's exciting. Good. Thank you for the super chat, Ivy. Appreciate it. Just be careful what you eat. That's what they're saying
Mhm.
here.
Listen,
yeah.
Derek, have you been to the UK?
I haven't.
Okay, listen, the stereotype about the food is accurate.
Really?
It is not as good as American food. Like, I got coleslaw today with lunch, and I was like, coleslaw, hard to mess up. It was basically cabbage with mayonnaise. I was like, yep, not gonna finish this coleslaw.
Really?
Oh man, I was so. It's the food is not horrendous, but like their best food is like mediocre American food, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an eater, man. So I might have to like get plans and be like, look, what are you making if I come out there? Oh man. Yes. Okay. I didn't watch the whole debate. It just seemed like at some point the tension got more tense. You could tell that things got worse over time. There was no getting anywhere. And I think that's a pretty high. I mean, let me have a final question from you, if you don't mind, because I could tell you're getting ready for nighttime. It's what time over there?
No, I got to stream in like 2 hours, man.
Oh,
it
really?
is what it is. We do a stream every Monday night. I got to do it. So yeah, we're doing. I just the only thing it has moved it an hour early for my own like well-being because it's getting late over here.
Okay, so then let me give you the opportunity to lay out your train of thought with you and God Logic. And what is her name? I can't remember. Bell. So you, Bell, and Avery were going to go into this. What were you hoping was going to occur in this debate prior to going in? Like what was the evidence you were likely trying to get into, and what were you hoping for?
We wanted to talk about the Gospels because that's where you find the historical Jesus. Like, so we want to talk about what Jesus said. Jesus said, "I send you prophets" in Matthew. Okay. Now what? Okay, that's obviously heretical for you guys. Okay, Jesus called himself Lord. I wanted to get to that argument. I didn't get a chance to get that argument where Jesus calls himself the double vocative Lord, which is, as Jason Staples shows, is always a reference to the Tetragrammaton in the Septuagint.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an argument I wanted to use. We didn't get a chance to get back to that. But I mean, we were just so frustrated because it's like, but we kind of thought they would do this because it's like, the Gospels contradict Islam, and they cannot affirm an historical Jesus that is going to disagree with Islam. So we expected them to do that. We just expected them to be a little bit more honest in the terms of sources we can use for the historical Jesus, not just basically admit, well, we take the Quran as metaphysically true, so therefore everything it says has to be true. Therefore, when we look at the Gospels, we're going to just pick the stuff out that agrees with the Quran, and the rest is not the historical Jesus, which is absurd, as you know. That there's no critical scholar that thinks that's the historical Jesus because they believe in the virgin birth. So even the scholars they're appealing to would reject everything they're saying because they believe it. They reject the virgin birth, but they believe Jesus was crucified and died. So, I mean, like the people they're appealing to would be looking at them going, we don't agree with either side here. Why are you appealing to us?
Right. That's an odd observation that the consensus of every critical scholar I know, just about other than ones who might question the historicity altogether of Jesus in the gospel material, would say he was crucified. That's like almost as certain as you can get historically. But then they would go, that virgin birth thing? No, at all. Like they're really highly, the gospel or the Quran is doing the opposite. They're saying, no, virgin birth happened. Clay birds to living birds happened. But then I had to throw that one in there. But then they turn around and go, crucifixion? And now I've heard some Muslims, and you've been engaging them more, they say the text isn't saying that he wasn't crucified. Is the overwhelming Muslim world saying it is?
So the majority of Sunni Muslims, and I believe Shia as well, would say the text is saying Jesus was not crucified. And that is because their scholars say that's what it's saying. Now, if you look at the Quran, and I'm talking to like an Ismaili or a Quran-only Muslim, some of them will be like, no, it's not saying Jesus was crucified. It's saying the Jews didn't crucify him. I go back and forth on that. Sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe the Quran is saying that. But it does say like they did not kill him. They did not crucify. It was only made to appear so. So it sounds like the Quran's response is, no. You Jews didn't kill him. The Romans killed him. The Quran's response is it was made to appear so that he was crucified, which suggests that, yeah, he was saved. So I kind of go back and forth. I see the traditional Sunnis point about what the Quran is saying, but sometimes a Quran-only Muslim makes a pretty good case. So I'd say it's kind of up in the air. But regardless, the Salafis and the Sunni tradition are going to be like, yes, it says he was not crucified. therefore they have to affirm that. I mean, it's one of Muhammad's biggest mistakes outside of the Islamic dilemma.
I brought up the Islamic dilemma, and I think when you visit me in person, that's what, in a month from now or something, like roughly?
That is next week, man. What are you talking about?
Next week? My brain's all screwed up. Hold on, let me look at
Yeah, I'm leaving Britain on Sunday, flying to
Okay.
Florida for a conference, and then I'm driving up to see you after that. I got
Got
a
it.
whole
Oh, I got you.
itinerary
The
here.
10th. The 10th. Okay. I'm sorry. If it weren't for my calendar, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll probably need to dive deeper into the Islamic dilemma, into the weeds when you get here. But for just briefly, for the viewers who are watching from MythVision who may not know, there's been an ongoing debate. If you haven't been watching, I have, between Christians and Muslims, and I haven't been watching everything, but there's a lot that goes on. And a recent sore spot with Islamic debates that have been happening is that this thing called the Islamic dilemma. Can you lay it out for everybody in like a nutshell for everyone, and then we'll dive into the weeds when you get here.
Yeah, so the Islamic dilemma, first of all, is not an argument that only Christians can use or Jews. That's a claim Muslims often make, but really an atheist could use it, a Hindu could use it, a Buddhist could use it, anyone could use it. Here's the Islamic dilemma. If the Bible has been corrupted, Islam is false. If the Bible has not been corrupted, Islam is false. So either way, Islam is false. It can only be that. Here's why. The Quran in numerous places confirms the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Surah 241 says, believe in my revelations, which confirm your scriptures. 447 says something well. Surah 3:3-4. Surah 291. Surah 5:47-48. Surah 5:68. You have Surah 7:157. You have Surah 10:94. You have 29:46. There's like over 100 verses you can pull from the Quran that speaks very positively of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Now just think about that. You know, Derek, that the Quran and the Bible contradict.
Yes.
Obviously, like no one's going to deny that. But the illiterate caravan robber of the 7th century, Muhammad, didn't know that because he was illiterate. So he assumed he was a prophet, and he assumed that, okay, if I'm a prophet like Jesus was and like Moses was, then I must be, whatever I'm getting, whatever pops into my head, must also be preaching the same message they preached. Therefore, I can confirm those scriptures because we're obviously going to be on the same page. So he just says over and over again, I'm confirming your scriptures, I'm confirming your scriptures, even though he contradicts them in multiple ways. So that creates the Islamic dilemma because the Quran claims to confirm our scriptures, the Bible. If we have the authoritative words of Allah in our Bible, then we can read them and judge that Islam is false because our Bible contradicts the Quran. But if our scriptures have been corrupted, why is Allah speaking through Muhammad and confirming corrupted scriptures? What is he, stupid? Like, so either way, Islam is false. That's the Islamic dilemma, and it's because some illiterate caravan robber wasn't smart enough to check the prior scriptures. And so anytime the Quran talks about the Jews and Christians and corrupting the scriptures, it says they're corrupting it with their tongues or they're substituting it with another book. Anytime the Jews or Christians would fight with Muhammad, Muhammad's response would be like, no, that's not what your scriptures say. They say what I'm saying. You're twisting it with your tongues because I'm obviously a prophet, you know.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's one of the problems I've heard is they try to say it's not that the texts are corrupt, but that what you're saying about them and how you're teaching them is corrupt. That I've heard that. But then we'll have to dive deeper into this when you get here because I think this is a big issue. As you know, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'm uploading a debate on the Islamic dilemma that we just filmed today on Friday. But also, this was not the only 3-verse-3 we filmed. We filmed another one on the Islamic dilemma. I don't know if that one's coming out Saturday because I also filmed myself when we did this 1 versus 4 Muslims. So I was on one side and there were 4 Muslims on the other side. And we were debating which is better for humanity, Islam or Christianity. I can't wait for that one to drop because, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for you to see what they admitted. It was horrifying. I mean, but they basically conceded the debate. I mean, they conceded that, yeah, Islam has more child marriage, has more cousin marriage, has more violence. I mean, like they just like, okay, you guys conceded basically.
Yeah. That's an easy, and you know, I've said it publicly. If I had to choose, it's a no-brainer to me. Just because that seems to be the obvious, better option in my view. Yeah. There's so much you guys are doing. Let me ask you a last question. I know I'm keeping you, but Do you feel threatened? A lot of people in the chat are like, be careful. I would want to do this with Muslims because I don't want to die, right? People are saying this. You've clearly stirred ruffled feathers. You guys have been doxxed. You've had a lot of like threats, I guess, through comments, messages, I imagine emails or whatever. How bad is it in your view?
I mean, we're getting doxxed. I've gotten death threats. They want to shut us up. But here's the thing, Derek. If we stop, they're going to think, oh, our death threats work. We'll use this now on Christians everywhere. So I kick it up a notch to teach them a lesson. You can't threaten us because we'll come after your fake prophet if you do that. Well, you can't be scared of these people.
Yeah.
We can't, because that's what they want to use to control us so that they can force Islam down our throats or try to sneak it in the back door. Not in the sense, but that's what they want to do. And that's a problem, because this is an evil religion that wants to conquer the whole world and subjugate everything to Islam. And if the Christians have to be the front line of defense, then by God, we will, because we want to make sure humanity is protected from this evil satanic religion that we want destroyed. So we'll do, listen, yes, they could come for me at any moment. I pray that never happens for my family's sake, but I'm not going to back down, because that's not the Christian thing to do.
Got it. Okay. Figure I'd ask. I've had a few threats, but I've also had threats from a Jewish guy who was pissed off that I did an interview with Rabbi Tovia Singer, and then I did a critical video about Yahweh in the Old Testament, and then he writes this email literally saying like stuff I can't say on YouTube, threatening like the whole nine because you betrayed Rabbi Tovia. I'm like, what the bro? This guy's cuckoo. Anyway, there's crazy people out there. You know how it is.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Look, we're not going to be scared. We can't be. And again, I'm a Christian. I believe if I die, I'm going straight to Christ. So I have no fear, and I honestly believe that wholeheartedly. So I mean, like, what do I have to fear? Nothing but fear itself, as FDR said.
Well, do you think I know I keep asking questions, but do you think there's a change that's happening in terms of the reception of criticism? Because most Muslims, from my understanding, weren't getting this heavily, what do you get, a cartoon every once in a while? It's not like there is a very strong movement of heavy textual historical criticism on the religion in the way that I see it happening right now. And now that the internet is connecting to all parts of the world, people are being kind of forced to see things they haven't seen or things they've heard. You think there's a massive change happening in the reception of criticism to the religion?
Oh yeah, there absolutely is. The Islamic dilemma has gone mainstream. More people know about it now than ever. And like, that's what we want. We want, anytime Muslims set up a dawah booth to try to convert people to Islam, they get swarmed by Christians that just show up and start going, what about the Islamic dilemma? What about Muhammad marriage Aisha? What about the night of the Al-Zut? Like, we want them, so much pressure on them that they're afraid to set up dawah tables. We're going to be peaceful. We're not going to threaten violence, but we're going to let them know they're not going to set up this fake religion in America or in the West, and we're going to push back now. So we need that stuff to go more mainstream, because these people have thrived on fear for 1,400 years. That's what they used to conquer, and that's not going to happen anymore. Now they're going to deal with people knowledgeable about their Sunnah, about their Quran, and then they're going to use it against them. So it is what it is. We got to keep pushing, otherwise they will dominate and try to take over the world.
Okay, I have so much we could say, but I think we should save it for in person when you come next week. Is there anything you want to say?
No, just check out the debate I have coming on the Islamic dilemma this Friday, and then I don't know what the next video is going to be on Saturday. It might be my 1v4, or it might be the second 3 verse 3 on the Islamic dilemma. So more's
That's
coming
on
out.
your channel, right? On your channel,
the 3 verse 3 will be on The Way with Brian DeVilla's channel.
Okay,
yeah,
that's the same. So that's the same guy here, right? The same one.
The one in the middle.
No, I mean, this show. This show.
Yeah, this show. Yeah.
Yeah.
He filmed 4 debates that day. He did a 1v1 with God Logic. Then we did 2 3v3s, and then I did my last one 1v4, and that was my favorite because they conceded so much. I couldn't believe it. Could not believe what they were willing to give me.
Okay. Damn. Well, dude, I'll see you next week. We'll have to dive into the weeds. And yeah, what time is it where you're at?
Time is it where I'm at? Oh, it is 10:30, man. It is late. Yeah.
You like going out there and debating at the where's it at? It's like the open area where everybody goes and debates.
Speaker's Corner. Yeah, we just went and we debated a Muslim because he was myself and God Logic, and then he was like, no, you must let me talk for 5 minutes. And I'm like, we already let you talk for 5 minutes. It's our turn to talk. So he's trying to monologue, and then he got mad and ran away. I'm like, dude, if you're gonna have a conversation, you can't monologue. 1 minute, 1 minute. Let's do that. He wouldn't even do that because he was, ridiculous.
Dang. Well, if you're interested, ladies and gentlemen, go check out Inspiring Philosophy. Stay tuned, watch the debates, get involved, actively check it out. Look, I've been learning for years, listening to David Wood stuff and thinking, while I'm critical of David or critical of, Christianity, I still learn. Like I still watch and I go, there's interesting things. And funny thing through the grapevine is, Michael, I've talked to textual critical scholars that study Islam, early Islamic sources. They have watched David. You know what I mean? They have sat there and listened. And they go, he's funny. Kind of reminds them of South Park in a way, the way he is. So I just think it's important to, if you're into this stuff, go and check it out and get your heads wrapped around the arguments, listen to the ideas. And yeah, anything else from you?
No, man, thanks for having me on. I was going to
you.
put a super chat in, but man, they won't let me because I'm in Britain. It's stupid.
Oh, you're out of the country. What do you want to say? You have the chance.
I was going to say thanks for having me on, but stupid thing.
Oh, don't worry about it. You're good. Later. Yeah, I'm glad you came in and got to share your side. I was curious to get your thoughts because you didn't get to say much during that one. I mean, you got some stuff, but
listen, I love Avery. I'll let him go. He loves to. I'm not going to interrupt him when he's on his flow. I think he's the best Christian debater we have. So I'm gonna, always support him.
Yeah, he seems like a chill dude, and then he starts cooking as he starts debating and getting hype, and you know how it is.
Yeah,
you know how it is. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this live stream reaction from me, and stay tuned. Michael Jones will be on the channel soon, and we're gonna arm wrestle in person live. I'm kidding. I'll see you in a week. I thought it was a month, man. Anyway.
No, I'm coming in next week. You better be ready.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, thank you. Enjoy. I'm going to end the stream now. Oh, tell Than I said what's up, by the way.
No.
Later, everybody.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland. And I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.